Chapter 2987. Working Together, 2. As soon as she located Di Hao, she wanted to inform Di Fui, or the Flying Serpent. However, the desert appeared to be a forbidden land with a wizardry barrier that prevented all means of communication with the outside world. Even as she was practically playing hide-and-seek with Fan Qianshi, she never stopped trying to crack the wizardry barrier, but nothing seemed to work. Like Fan Qianshi, she could not locate the edge of the desert, nor could she escape through the sky. She wanted to find the god of demons, as she believed that would be the way out. However, even the pink candle dragon did not know the way out despite being in the desert for countless years. Apparently, the demon appeared and disappeared out of the blue. Another day went by. Gu Shijiu sat on the sand and looked annoyed at the scorching sun. She could not wait to leave the place. Her extensive life experience had taught her to be a tough woman. In fact, nothing could really make her feel sad, but there was something about the desert that kept pulling her down. A feeling of deep distress kept befalling her. "Master, why are you crying?" Little Pink got close and stared at her in bafflement. Gu Shijiu wiped her eyes, only to realize that she was, indeed, tearing up. She shook her sorrow away and stood right up at once. "I'm not crying. I have sand in my eyes. Why does the man keep pursuing us when none of us can get out of here?" Little Pink was quite troubled. "He is a lunatic," Gu Shijiu commented on Fan Qianshi's behavior. Due to Fan Qianshi's stubborn pursuit, Gu Shijiu became reluctant to build tent. She had to teleport every few minutes so that he had no way to pinpoint her exact location. Things would have been much more comfortable with a tent. Little Pink must have been bored interacting with Di Hao, who was now quietly working on his recovery, so he decided to approach Gu Shijiu instead. Wanting to get tired of the endless pursuit, a lunatic knows nothing about being tired. Little Pink thought about the situation for a moment and became quite eager to leave. "How I wish I could get out of here. I have been looking forward to returning to the outside world." "Master, the demon looks exactly like you. Could she be an embodiment of your previous life?" Dumbfounded, Gu Shijiu had never met the woman, so she had no idea how much they actually resembled one another. She pondered about the possibilities for a moment and then added, "I don't think so. If the demon resembled my previous life, how could I even come into existence when she was still around? Perhaps she was not an embodiment, but a form of obsession that lingered on." "Master, have you had any obsession that you did not achieve?" Gu Shijiu thought about it seriously, but nothing came to mind. "No. She had a loving husband and 2 adorable children. There was nothing more that she could ask for. There was only one thing that she desperately wished for. I hope that Fan Qianshi can just disappear from the world. I never want to see him again." She could not help but express the amount of hatred that she had for this peculiar man. The pink candle dragon quietly agreed. After that, Gu Shijiu stood up abruptly and began yawning. "Let's move," she addressed her comrades. Then, she reached out and held Di Hao's hand. At the same time, the pink candle dragon also reached out its claw to her. "Master, don't forget about me." "Of course." Gu Shijiu took its claw as well. All of a sudden, the pink candle dragon experienced a sharp pain on its body. Abruptly, the creature pulled its claw out from her grasp and retreated anxiously. "Master." Chapter 2988. Working Together, 3. In the blink of an eye, the pink candle dragon's chubby claw appeared bruised and dirty green in color. It was obviously poisoned. "Fan Qianshi, did you really think I would not find out?" Gu Shijiu said scornfully. The pink candle dragon remained quiet. All of a sudden, a glimpse of light flashed by, and the chubby creature was no longer there. Apparently, Fan Qianshi decided to reveal himself. His hand was covered in a mass of bruises. "Shijiu, you truly are the smartest. There is nothing that can escape your eyes. Look at what you have done to me, all because of one careless mistake." He sighed. While he talked, he never stopped extracting the poisoned blood from his veins. Was he really the god of creation? She realized that their strengths were indeed incomparable. In fact, there was no chance for her to win if she chose to fight him face to face. The best chance of survival was to flee, but she could not leave the pink candle dragon behind. Fan Qianshi seemed to have Red Gu Zijia's concern. "Shijio, don't you try to run away from me again, or I will skin the creature." He reached to the side and pulled the pink candle dragon out of nowhere. It was clearly unconscious, and its entire body turned red due to the dilation of its blood vessels. Also, it was drenched in sweat. Gu Shijio was shocked. "Fan Qianshi, no living thing should be kept in a storage bag. How could you put it in there? The pink candle dragon would be dead if it were trapped any longer." "Oh, really? No living thing is allowed?" Fan Qianshi wiped the sweat away with his finger and continued rather ironically, "No wonder it is drenched." He then looked at Gu Shijio and continued, "Shijio, stop running away, will you? Otherwise, I will have to keep it away in my storage bag again while I go after you. As you may already know, I'm a rather lazy and clumsy person. I may forget to take it out to get some fresh air. Who knows how long it would be left in there? Read more chapters at List Novel." Comet was a firm threat, and Gu Shijio knew that Fan Qianshi was surely capable of inflicting such hostile pain on the poor creature. Therefore, she would no longer run away. "I did not want to run at first, but your tireless pursuit quite entertained me, so I decided to play along," she added with a polite smile. She began yawning again, seeming out of boredom. "We are not getting out of this place, anyway. So, your pursuit seems insignificant. What good can it do?" "Where is Di Fui?" Fan Qianshi asked. "He and I have parted ways. We were supposed to contact each other when Di Hao was found. However, apparently getting into this place is a one-way ticket. All means of communication fail miserably. I cannot send out any messages to him at all." Fan Qianshi could not tell if she was telling the truth or not. "Fan Qianshi, we are both trapped here. Shall we cease our fight for now? We should work together to find a way out. Our feuds can wait." Gu Shijio took another look at the harsh sun and suggested, "Two brains are better than one, right?" She had a point. "You are right. Killing you here would be meaningless if I cannot make it out in the end. I might die of boredom from having no one around." Fan Qianshi agreed. He then reached out to her and said, "If we are going to work together, you need to show your sincerity." "What do you mean exactly? Do you still have your favorite sour plum wine?" "I shall have 2 bottles. Dumbstruck, Gu Shijio did not expect that wine was all that he would ask for. Chapter 2989. Scheming against one another. Gu Shijio did not bother to reply. Her storage bag was never short of wine, especially those that she enjoyed. In fact, she had a habit of stocking up a great supply of wine wherever she went. Slightly annoyed by the request, she threw 2 bottles of wine to him. Fan Qianshi caught the bottles and started sniffing them with his eyes closed as if reminiscing about the past. "It has been a while. I miss the taste." Gu Shijio did not answer him again. Sour plum wine was not something uncommon in the 6 worlds. It was available almost everywhere. It could not be difficult for him to obtain the wine, so it was a rather odd request. Was he going to play some tricks again? Di Hao knew that the man was up to no good, but he did not say anything. Fan Qianshi turned the bottle open in an eager urge to drink the wine, but paused for a minute, as if wondering if he would regret consuming it so soon. Gu Shijio offered another bottle to him. "Just drink it." Fan Qianshi received the bottle and continued, "Are you feeling bad for me?" He studied at her expression fixedly. Gu Shijio did not answer, for he was obviously overthinking the situation. With a smile, she continued, "Now that we are working together, I can be more accommodating. I have plenty of wine. If you'd like more, just say it." Her smile was all Fan Qianshi could focus on at that moment. He looked away and turned his attention to the wine again. With a sip, he started savoring the wine. "Master, I would like some too." "I like this wine." The pink candle dragon requested for some as it was craving for a drink. Gu Shijio softly patted its head. "Haven't I given you a large bottle earlier? How did you finish it so quickly?" "The wine is delicious. Also, I am a heavy drinker," the pink candle dragon awkwardly replied. Hearing its reply, Gu Shijio offered it an extra large-sized bottle of wine. "All right, this is all for you then." Delighted, the pink candle dragon opened the bottle and downed it all in one go. The tantalizing scent of the wine was widespread at that moment. With his eyes closed, Fan Qianshi could smell in the air. The wine that the pink candle dragon had was the same quality as the one he had, but the amount was 10 times more than the bottle in his hand. Apparently, Gu Shijio really did have plenty of wine. The way she gave it away was absolutely generous. Quickly, he finished off his bottle before asking for another one. "Pleasure to work with you, comrade. May I have another bottle?" Dihao was greatly astonished by the power of wine in bringing people together. A few bottles were able to build a temporary connection between two enemies who always wanted to kill one another. Gu Shijio was ready to work with Fan Qianshi for sure. Therefore, she did not mind giving out another bottle to him. "Pleasure working with you too." Before she could finish speaking, someone was already grasping her by the wrist. As swift as a shadow, Fan Qianshi's arm had extended over 2 feet long to seize her wrist and seal her acupuncture point. By sealing it, her qi reservoir became inaccessible, so she could no longer use her spiritual power. In an instant, her legs became jelly-like, as she had lost half of her strength in 1 second. She did not collapse entirely before the bottle in Fan Qianshi's hand suddenly exploded. Countless tiny, hair-like needles blew out from the bottle and stung him right on the chest. It was normal for powerful people like Fan Qianshi to always protect themselves with a wizardry barrier that could prevent all physical harm from sudden attacks. However, the secret weapon that Gu Shijio had was nothing ordinary. Di Fui produced the needle-like weapon only recently and immediately gave it to her. According to him, the secret weapon was able to break through any forms of wizardry barriers that were used to protect individuals. The only downside was that the weapon could only be used once, for the material was extremely rare. Chapter 2990. Scheming Against One Another. 2. Gu Shijio treated the item like a treasure and was reluctant to use it. However, the best opportunity happened to present itself, and she could not hold back. It was a good time to put the needles to use, as Fan Qianshi never saw it coming. It was truly a coincidence that both of them decided to turn hostile at the same time. Their brief moment of connection over wine had been completely shattered in an instant. Gu Zijia's spiritual power became inaccessible, while Fan Qianshi, on the other hand, was greatly affected by the needles. His head went blank while his body became numb. He could no longer keep his balance and started to sway as he walked. She, too, was swaying a little, but managed to take a few steps back to keep her balance. Judging from the current situation, Gu Shijio seemed to be on the advantageous side. The pink candle dragon was impressed. "Kill him. End him now." The pink candle dragon hated the man thoroughly. It started chanting for his death. Without further ado, it jumped straight into the attack with its mouth wide open in an attempt to crush the man into many tiny pieces. No way. Gu Shijio had to pull its lantern to stop it from biting him. The pink candle dragon was totally bewildered. "Why can't I kill him? This man is wicked. If we do not kill him now, there will be consequences. He is now affected by the numbing drugs. If you bite him, you will be affected just the same." Gu Shijio then dragged Little Pink away. The amount of drugs that she applied on the needles was able to take down an entire tyrannosaur. Just one tiny scratch on his skin would put the pink candle dragon down. Convinced by her explanation, the pink candle dragon finally gave up on the idea of sinking its teeth into his skin, but refused to stand aside and do nothing. Swiftly, it dispensed a layer of poisonous pink fog around Fan Qianshi from its mouth. Read more chapters at List Novel. The poisonous fog was known to corrode all sorts of things with its high acidity. Fan Qianshi was submerged in the pink, toxic air, but it was not able to do him any harm. Instead, it woke him right up from unconsciousness. He opened his eyes and saw Gu Shijio, who was standing close by. "I thought we agreed to work together. How could you attack me so sneakily?" "You too did the same to me," Gu Shijio replied with heavy irony. "What do you plan to do with me? Do you want to end my life?" Fan Qianshi locked his eyes to hers. Gu Shijio displayed a red sword before his eyes before answering. "You are right. Are you really going to kill me, though? Let's find out. In an instant, the sword in Gu Zijia's hand rose into the air and aimed itself straight at Fan Qianqi's neck. It was meant to be a deadly attack. The sword was specially designed to kill evil people and spirits. She was confident that it would be a fatal hit, as Fan Qianqi was still unable to move. Even if she could not kill him, he would at least be critically injured to prevent him from playing any tricks. As soon as she waved her sword down to attack, blood could be seen spilling everywhere as if a man had just been beheaded. Gu Shijio was quite surprised as everything happened way too easily. "Mother, watch out!" Dihao called out loud. A sword could be seen heading for her feet. Alarmed, Gu Shijio noticed the danger. She wanted to teleport away, but a pair of hands from the ground secured her ankles, making her unable to move. Dihao aimed his sword at the hands, but it was not made of flesh. Unexpectedly, his sword made a clanging sound as if it crashed into some sort of metal and bounced back to him with great intensity. He almost cut himself with the sword. Those hands did not stop right. With a strong pull, Gu Shijio was shoved onto the ground hastily. It was not utilizing the ground drilling technique, but in an instant, Gu Shijio was already buried deep in the yellow sand. She held her breath and made a few quick kicks to free herself, but it did not work. She then bent her body forward so that she could attack the hands that were still securing her ankles. However, someone could be heard chuckling at her attempt. The hands on her ankles suddenly let go and pushed her feet upward. If Gu Shijio missed the hands, she would most probably have hit her own legs and became disabled. Fortunately, she was able to stop herself in time. However, those hands from the ground seized the chance and threw her forward. Chapter 2991. Scheming Against One Another 3. Fortunately, she was able to stop herself in time. However, those hands from the ground seized the chance and threw her forward. It was not long before the hands started violently attacking her. Gu Zijia's acupuncture points had been sealed off, thus restricting her movements once again. Another arm reached out to secure her waist tightly. There was so much pressure on her hand that she could feel her waist aching. "Gu Shijio, I did not expect that you would hit me with such deadly strikes." Fan Qianqi's voice started to ring in her ears. He sounded annoyed. "I could say the same to you." Gu Shijio was already drenched in a cold sweat. She could finally be honest with her thoughts, for they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality. To her surprise, Fan Qianqi's spiritual level was powerful enough for him to create another embodiment mistakable as his true self. Apparently, she had been completely fooled. "How are we the same? You wanted me dead, but I could never have the heart to hurt you." Fan Qianshi seemed annoyed and heartbroken at the same time. "Gu Shijio, you have always been so harsh," he said while pulling her even closer to him. Gu Shijio felt as if iron shackles had tightly chained her waist. The joints on her backbone could be heard popping and cracking due to the pressure. Fan Qianshi was obviously punishing her as he had sealed away all of her acupuncture points so that she could not access her spiritual power. Without any spiritual power, she needed air to stay alive, but he was holding her tightly beneath the ground without the use of any proper ground drilling. They were both squeezed in the sand without any air. Also, the way he held her made it even difficult for her to breathe. Fortunately, her physical body was at the level of a great deity, which granted her a certain level of immortality. Otherwise, she would be long dead from suffocation. Gu Shijio felt as if she were being buried alive. It was a terrible feeling. The color from her face began to flush, and soon she turned pale. It did not take long for her to start coughing out blood. Fan Qianshi watched icily as her body began to fail, but he did not intend for her to die, so he started casting some spells. "Let her go." The sand was parted to the sides. Dihao could be seen approaching them, though still looking quite pale. There was a bent blade in his hand with a sharp edge aimed directly at Fan Qianshi. Fan Qianshi looked at Dihao in utter disbelief. "Isn't that the world-cutting blade from the master of the heavenly law? How did you get this?" "Good. It seems you understand the power of this weapon. Now let go of her, or I will use this blade right now, and we shall all perish together," Dihao sternly said. Let's talk outside. She cannot hold on much longer. Fan Qianshi then brought her out of the sandy ground. Di Hao stayed close to them the entire time. Master! The pink candle dragon rushed forward in an attempt to take Gu Shijio out from his arms. Fan Qianshi simply waved his hand in the air to create a mobile vortex of rotating winds, and the candle dragon was immediately sent far away by the gusts of wind. It crashed into the ground and had to stay low for a moment to regain its strength. Fan Qianshi, don't you think it is a shame for you to use your power as the god of creation against a helpless candle dragon? It is too noisy. Fan Qianshi did not care about the pink candle dragon at all. He only kept it alive because of his promise to Little Black. Otherwise, the vortex of rotating winds that he had just summoned would be much more violent, enough to shed its flesh into pieces. Swiftly, he continued to seal off dozens of acupuncture points on Gu Zijia's body to take away her mobility. Little Shijio, don't you try to play any tricks. You can no longer get away from me, he said while putting her down on the ground. With an additional wizardry barrier cast around her, no one would be able to get close to her. He then turned his attention to Di Hao and started mocking him. I did not expect to see you with this blade. I have been underestimating you, for sure. However, it cannot be simply used by anyone. Do you know how to use it? We can test your hypothesis, Di Hao said with a smile. He held the blade tightly in his hand, and a steady flow of blood was then drawn from his fingertip to the sharp edge of the blade, thus igniting the blade into a glowing metal. Chapter 2992. Scheming against one another for, soon, glimpses of seven-colored rays flashed right through the blade and blasted up into the air. Like a dragon that had just been released, it uttered a long and loud cry before reaching into the sky. The calmness of the desert disappeared all at once as strong winds started to storm around the surface, along with rolls of dark clouds filling the sky. Bolts of seven-colored lightning started to scatter within the heavy clouds. Stop! Stop it! Fan Qianshi suddenly called out loud with a sense of emergency. Di Hao held the blade with both hands and gave a swing. At the same time, the seven-colored ray from the blade disappeared. As soon as the seven-colored ray faded away, the clouds began to disperse as well, leaving the fierce sun to burn the ground once again. Fan Qianshi looked at Di Hao, who was still in his small-sized body. Di Hao fixed his eyes on him as well, in a composed manner. His toddler appearance did not affect his tremendous source of power at all. In an instant, the child's aura was completely different. He was strong, mysterious, and even intimidating, like a god who was overlooking the world. The pink candle dragon had just got back on its feet, but knelt back down and touched the ground with its forehead as soon as it saw Di Hao. From afar, the black candle dragon noticed the change as well, so it faced Di Hao's direction and began kneeling. Only the master of heavenly law had such powers. Fan Qianshi began to panic. How is this even possible? Di Hao continued to play with the seven-colored blade in his hand, shedding gleams and dazzling lights on his little face. Nothing is impossible. Fan Qianshi, you should be very well aware of what the blade can do. Don't you try to challenge my patience. The world-cutting blade was a secret weapon that only belonged to the master of the heavenly law, with an ability to create immensely powerful destruction. Once used, all of the living things in the same space would be wiped off, except for the master of the heavenly law himself. Fan Qianshi witnessed the actual power of the blade once, in a world where all kinds of ferocious beasts triumphed the earth. They were too stubborn to be taught and trained. So, to prevent its negative influence from spreading to another world, Di Fui had to use the blade. All living things were completely wiped off to zero existence, making the blade a legitimate weapon of total destruction. Fan Qianshi could never forget what the blade could do. Back then, when Di Fui was still a friend, Fan Qianshi once asked for the blade out of curiosity. Di Fui did not hesitate to pass the blade to him. However, he could not even hold the blade up. In an unexpected turn, the blade started chasing him around like he was an enemy. The pursuit finally came to an end when Di Fui took back possession of the blade. Di Fui once told him that only the master of the heavenly law could put the blade to use. It would not work for others. Anyone who tried to take the blade by force would have to face the consequences. Seeing Di Hao with the blade certainly came as a shock to Fan Qianshi. Utterly distressed, he could not figure out if what Di Fui told him in the past was a lie, or if the child was indeed the master of the heavenly law. There would only be one master of the heavenly law. Even when Di Fui was reincarnated in another life, as long as his soul remained, the master of the heavenly law would still be him. Di Fui was well and alive, so this fact certainly baffled Fan Qianshi. Who exactly was Di Hao? Fan Qianshi had no answers to all of his questions, so he threw a glance at Gu Shijiao and caught her staring at the child in astonishment. It would seem that she was unaware of the child's identity, too. "Let's make peace, shall we?" Fan Qianshi smilingly offered. Di Hao was a little surprised. Di Hao, with one quick use of this blade, all of the living things in this continent will come to an end as you know it, which includes your mother here. Instead of being destroyed indiscriminately, I think we should work together and find a way to escape from this bloody place. A cold voice interrupted. "No one can ever leave this place. All of you are staying here with me." They turned around and saw a lady standing gracefully at the side. Chapter 2993. Who are you? Her snowy white dress looked even clearer and brighter than the fluffy white clouds in the sky. However, some parts of her dress were, unfortunately, stained with blood. They were unsure if those stains were actually blood or just some splashes that were added as decorations. Her pitch-black hair and supple red lips created a strong contrast to her ghostly pallor. Like hollows of darkness, there was almost no white in her eyes. In fact, a quick look in her eyes was enough to capture one's soul. Gu Shijiao was trying to release her acupuncture points that were disabled by Fan Qianshi when the lady suddenly made her appearance. Surprisingly, the lady looked exactly the same as her. The only difference was that the lady seemed to have immense dark power. The look in her eyes seemed to contain an abyss of great sorrows. What a shame. As soon as the lady appeared, feelings of great distress began to develop in Gu Zijia's heart. Also, the weather began to change dramatically, as usual, while thick layers of gray clouds obscured the sun. Gusts of wind swept through the desert, creating howls from the gale. Gu Zijia's mind went blank at once. She did not know how the others felt, but did not feel quite right. Feelings of sorrow and grief suddenly overwhelmed her, as if she had just been abandoned by the whole world, trapped in a place with no way out. The depression signaled a prelude to a complete breakdown for Gu Shijiao. She felt the need to destroy the world. She wanted the world to end by her hand. She knew that it was all because of the lattice presence, which was powerful enough to affect her in such a detrimental way. She had been through many things and fought many creatures before, so the manipulation of emotions was not something she had not come across before. The tactic was targeted at the opponent's mood, thus driving them nuts with a disturbed state of mind. In the past, she was always resilient enough to resist any emotional manipulation. But this time was completely different. She knew that something was wrong, but she could not get rid of the great sorrows that were building in her heart. Was it because she was injured? Fan Qianshi did not let her die of suffocation earlier, so her body was critically injured. Also, most of her acupuncture points were sealed, thus disabling her ability to set her mind straight in this time of great distress. She knew that she should stay focused on her recovery. However, the sadness in her heart was too much for her to manage. She could not keep calm at all with a multitude of things going on, and it would probably only make things worse. Determined, Gu Shijiao gave her tongue a hard bite to try to wake herself up. You can start to think about the happy times when you experience a disturbed state of mind, like those times that we spent lovingly one another, or the joy that our children have brought to our lives. She was reminded of Di Fui's advice. Fan Qianshi had the ability to control one's state of mind. He even had a bad history of abusing dark magic to control one's emotions. In order to prevent Gu Shijiao from falling into his trap, Di Fui once taught her a way to filter her thoughts to stay composed. Additionally, with the aid of a spell, she could always regain control very quickly. Di Fui's images started to linger in her head. She started reminiscing his every smile, kiss, and shared affection. He was her strongest support, so as long as he was around, there was nothing she was afraid of. With a smile, her heart was instantly filled with joy and happiness. The feelings of depression had slowly faded. "What are you smiling at?" A clear voice echoed in her ears. Gu Shijio looked up and was shocked. The lady was standing right in front of her and looking down at her in a condescending manner. Flashes of red light glimpsed in her black eyes at the time. Looking at someone who had the same appearance made Gu Shijio feel rather uncomfortable. It was as if she was looking into a horror mirror. "Who are you?" Gu Shijio asked abruptly. The lady looked a little lost as well. "Who are you?" She echoed her words. Chapter 2994. Her hobby. Gu Shijio remained quiet, but the lady suddenly reached out to Gu Shijio. The wizardry barrier that Fan Qianshi had put up should have been able to keep everyone out of reach. However, the lady was clearly unaffected by the barrier. She placed her soft hand on Gu Zijia's face and started caressing it gently. "You and I look exactly the same. Did you steal my face?" Her hand was icy cold, so every single stroke was cold enough to freeze the victim's veins by turning warm blood into ice. Gu Shijio was incapable of moving right now, so she had to endure the chilliness of the woman's physical touch. It was so cold that she could feel chills going down her spine. The lady did not only bring about the cold in the area, she also brought forward an immense sense of pain and sorrow in Gu Zijia's heart. All of a sudden, she hugged her arms tightly and said, "I feel so cold. Do you feel the same? Look at them. They have become ice statues now." Shocked by what she heard, Gu Shijio quickly looked around. Di Hao, Fan Qianshi, and the pink candle dragon were all standing frozen, each in their own position of cultivating. All of their bodies were covered by a layer of ice, making them look like intricate ice statues. Di Hao was looking at her, with his mouth half open, as if asking for help from his mother. The pink candle dragon had its eyes on her unwaveringly. It looked quite pathetic and was obviously fearful of the lady. As for Fan Qianshi, he must not have thought that he would be trapped by the ice so quickly. Based on his stance, it seemed that he was about to issue a fire spell. Gu Shijio could recognize the spell. It was certainly powerful enough to melt away any extreme cold and ice in an instant. He would have been able to stay clear of any ice surfaces once the spell was performed. Things obviously took an unexpected turn, based on his current condition. He basically stood there looking like a depressed ice statue. Meanwhile, Gu Shijio had to endure the lattice ice-cold fingers. "Is it cold?" Whenever the lady touched her, the vessels under Gu Zijia's skin would freeze almost instantaneously. It was a rather painful encounter. "I've been trapped here for thousands of years in the ice and snow, with no one to accompany me. I am so lonely. Will you stay with me?" Gu Shijio could tell that a steady stream of ice was slowly transferred into her bloodstream, penetrating every inch of her skin and bones. Her whole body started to freeze to the point where she felt that she was also turning into an ice sculpture. Even breathing became difficult since the air was filled with ice crystals. Every breath she took brought the spiky ice crystals into her air passages and lungs, thus inflicting injuries in her respiratory system. She was clearly in pain to the point where leaving her physical body behind suddenly seemed like a great option. Life is painful as it is, with more suffering than joy. Why don't you just let it go? The lattice voice echoed in Gu Zijia's ears like a wicked chant, telling her to give up. The voice seemed to have the power to induce a change of mindset in Gu Shijio. She started to become convinced that she really should give up. Life had always been a painful journey, especially being trapped in a physical body that only brought her pain. Perhaps she could let go and finally relieve herself from the pain. The thoughts of giving up started to become clear, which sped up the freezing process of her physical body. Her soul was at the brink of leaving her body for good. However, Something told her that it was not right. She wanted to talk back to the woman, but was too stiff to move due to the cold. She wanted to tell the woman that her interpretation of life was incorrect. Indeed, life was a long, painful journey, but not for her. She had Di Fui. If something happened to her, he would be devastated. The thought of him became the anchor for her soul as she struggled to stay in her body. She tried to shake the negative thoughts away that was clearly coming from the woman's influence. The lady was rather surprised. Glimpses of red flashes accompanied her pitch-black eyes. Look at them. They are willing to give up their bodies and become dust. In fact, it is a really nice feeling, she softly convinced. Chapter 2995. Her hobby, too. She pointed at the rest of them. Di Hao, Fan Qianshi, and the pink candle dragon were 3 respective ice statues. As soon as she pointed at them, they were immediately shattered into broken ice cubes and became part of the thick snow on the ground. However, Gu Shijio could feel her head spinning in agony. With a shriek, she uttered his name in an expression of terror. As a result, her chest was immediately filled with ice as soon as she called out his name. It was a terrible feeling. She had come all the way here to save her son, but he was shattered into pieces in an instant. What was the point of it all? She could not even save the life of her own son. Perhaps there was truly no point in living, anyway. She should probably just wither and die. Yes, just wither and die. The voice echoed again, trying to convince her to give up. Gu Shijio closed her eyes, seemingly ready to give up. However, a sudden realization dawned on her. Something was not right. Hao Air and Little Pink had told her some stories about the woman. Little Pink was recognized as a crucial element to the sustainability of the desert. Everyone else could be turned into ice except that creature. Otherwise, it would not be able to survive this long. Alarmed, she looked around at the expanse of white snow. The snow had sluiced down over the earth, covering everything in white. Di Hao, Fan Qianshi, and the pink candle dragon were no longer with her. Only the lady was present. She was looking at her with a charming smile. This must be an illusion, no doubt. She needed a way out. There must be a way to escape. Gu Zijia's face was turning paler by the second, but she was not ready to give up. Mother! A voice could be heard calling out loud to her from afar. Mother! You are the god of creation. You cannot let yourself die. Like morning bells, these words came across her mind like a loud, deafening reminder. At the same time, she was suddenly reminded of a series of spells that could be used to break free from illusions. It was her last possible hope, so she had to try. Eagerly, she put it to use and started reciting the spells in her mind. All of a sudden, the entire view changed. Gu Shijio opened her eyes, only to see the stubborn ice around Gu Zijia's body slowly melting away. However, dark clouds still filled the sky, sending snowflakes down the earth. The lady in white still stood in the snow, with her eyes locked intently at her. For a brief moment, Gu Shijio thought that she was still trapped in her nightmare. But very soon, the sight of her son changed her mind. Di Hao's little body was already half buried in the snow. He could be seen performing a spell in a determined effort to stay alive. As soon as their eyes met, he was immediately relieved. Mother! You are finally awake. Gu Shijio was relieved that her son was alive, and there was more reason for her to stay hopeful. She turned around and wanted to check Fan Qianqi's current state. He did not freeze at all. In fact, he behaved quite normally, except for his deathly pale complexion. He stood in a stiff position as if trying to perform a spell. Gu Shijio caught his eyes, and the man could not help but remark, "Not bad. You made it back by yourself," he scornfully said with a smile. His voice was a little hoarse, however. His casual and elegant aura was no longer the same. In fact, he still looked a little stiff. His smile was also rather creepy. Gu Shijio never liked him, so his creepy smile just made her feel even more disgusted. Of course, I never thought to see you alive, though, she answered with heavy irony. Fan Qianshi remained silent. Meanwhile, the pink candle dragon caught her attention. The creature was well and alive, but not at its finest state. Scared, it stayed still in a squatting position. Only its eyes moved around, and as soon as it saw Gu Shijio, it heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 2996. Her Hobby 3. Gu Shijio was certainly relieved that they were all alive. However, the boy was not doing quite well. His body was already half frozen. Gu Shijio quickly teleported next to her son. She then placed her hand on his legs to transfer a steady stream of heat into the frozen lower half of his body to melt away the ice. After a while, Dihao was able to move his arms and legs a bit. "Mother, you are able to move again," he said excitedly while tugging her sleeves. When the lady in white first approached Gu Shijio, she looked like she was getting possessed. A layer of ice appeared and disappeared from her body from time to time. However, she had no consciousness. Her eyes remained shut all the time. Anxiously, Dihao rushed forward to help, but before he could even get close, half of his body became frozen. Luckily, he realized in time that danger was real, so he started performing a spell to keep a void being turned into an ice sculpture. Nevertheless, he was only able to save his upper body. He tried to hit the lady in white with a strike, but realized that his spiritual power was too depleted to cause any harm. All he could do was to call out for his mother, but she did not seem to be able to wake up. Her face could be seen getting paler and paler, which indicated that her soul might be on the brink of leaving her body. The pink candle dragon called out to her in high pitches as well, but none of its calling was heard. Panicked, Dihao realized that he had to try everything that he could. "Fan Qianshi, are you just going to let her die?" He tried to trigger him and, hopefully, get him to help. Read more chapters at List Novel. Fan Qianshi stood very still. He only gave Dihao a quick glance, but did not answer anything. It was at that point that Dihao decided to address her by her real identity. He was desperate to save her. Surprisingly, it worked like magic, and Gu Shijio woke up in time. Dihao realized that the spell that Gu Shijio used to break free from the illusion was a very magical and powerful one. It was not a skill that she could possess from her current level of spiritual power. Needless to say, it was probably a skill that she acquired from her previous life as the creation deity. Although Gu Shijio had no memory of being the god of creation, some things about her past and some odd techniques would always come to her mind in times of great danger. That was a perfect example of it. Dihao was glad that she could break free from the illusion. His mother always managed to work wonders. At present, Gu Shijio patted Dihao lightly on her head as she said, "Of course, I can always find a way to recover." Deep down, she was a little perplexed, though. Fan Qianshi had obviously restricted her movements when he sealed her acupuncture points. Therefore, when the lady first took control of her, she tried very hard to break free on her own, but failed. Magically, she managed to free herself from Fan Qianshi's restriction as she found a way to put a stop to the illusion. The injuries that she had suffered also seemed to subside. She took a look at the sky, and clouds only see the gray clouds in the distance. The sun was nowhere to be seen. It felt as if she had come to the very southern edge of the earth. Gu Shijio looked in her storage bag and took out a fur coat along with a heavy cloak, one for herself and the other for Dihao. The garments were obviously two magical items. Both items looked rather bulky and loose at first, but as soon as they put the garments on, the sizes automatically adjusted to a perfect fit. The pink candle dragon wanted a cloak too. "Hey, master, can I have one?" Gu Shijio hesitated a little before offering it a fur blanket. "Do you want this?" The pink candle dragon took the blanket and covered its body right away. "There is nothing for me, surely," Fan Qianshi scornfully said. No one answered him. In fact, Gu Shijio pretended that he was not even there. Gu Shijio felt so much better after putting on the cloak. With a clear head, she started to recall many questions that she had, which were left unanswered. Chapter 2997. Her Hobby 4. According to the pink candle dragon, as soon as the lady made an appearance, the surrounding temperature would immediately plummet to absolute zero. Also, it would not take long before one frosted up and turned to ice. Honestly, at the time, Gushijio thought that the situation would not be as bad as what it had described. She then took a look at the lady, who was still standing there with effortless grace. She seemed a bit preoccupied as she stared at Gushijio blankly. The look in her eyes was so profound that it somehow felt like a bottomless void. "Do you have any wine?" the lady suddenly asked. Before Gushijio could answer, Fan Qianshi was already speaking out loud on her behalf. "Yes." He then threw the woman a bottle of sour plum wine and proudly said, "Try this one. I am sure you will like it." The lady took the wine and sniffed the heavy aroma that the wine exuded. However, she did not seem very impressed. Fan Qianshi was a little nervous, for he was suddenly not sure if she was going to like it. He knew that it was Gu Zijia's current favorite wine, but perhaps he was mistaken. Curious, the lady finally took a sip. "Damn it! How dare you lie to me?" she exclaimed furiously. She then struck him with a hit and blew a severe snowstorm toward him. Fan Qianshi was almost critically injured. The cold was not to be underestimated. He felt like his entire body was submerged in an ice pool at that point. In order to stay alive, he had to use all of his spiritual power to resist the cold. "Master, this really is your favorite wine," he said while trembling in the cold. He could not believe that it was wrong. "Not this wine." The lady held the bottleneck in a tight grasp. She seemed rather disappointed. "Not this one," she repeated. Which wine did she want? Fan Qianshi had no idea at all. He looked at Gushijio for an answer. "Isn't the wine your favorite?" Puzzled, Gushijio did not understand why her answer even mattered at all. She did not feel that she was associated with the lady in white. Their preferences could not possibly be the same, though they shared the same appearance. Even twins could have completely different tastes and preferences. "Mother, isn't that your favorite wine?" Dihao asked in a low tone. Meanwhile, the surrounding temperature started to drop again. Without her favorite wine, it seemed that the entire world would be doomed in extreme cold. Gushijio stopped to think for a moment. Soon, she took out a bottle of wine, intricately carved with unsophisticated and straightforward patterns. Dihao could immediately tell that it was his father's work of art. "My favorite wine is actually the one that your father personally brews, but the ingredients are scarce, so he did not produce a lot of it. I will only take a sip whenever I crave for it," Gushijio explained. She took a quick look at the lady and caught her lingering eyes on the bottle. "Give it to me." Gushijio was reluctant to give it away, but she did not have much choice. She had strong feelings of attachment for the wine, for it was something that Di Fui personally made for her. However, in the current circumstances, she could only do as told. She then passed the bottle to her, with a slight reminder. "Please give it back to me if you do not like it. It is all I have left." The lady took the bottle over and opened the cork right away. The air was immediately filled with a captivating scent of wine. Excitedly, the lady held the bottle up with trembling hands and took a careful sip. She paused to taste it before taking another sip. They all held their breath as they watched her. Soon, they were relieved by the fact that she was actually enjoying the wine. Fan Qianshi did not know what to feel, for he never thought that the wicked woman was only craving for wine. She was plagued by her irrevocable obsession with Di Fui's wine. At that moment, Fan Qianshi's heart was quickly filled with utter bitterness. The lady looked like an addict as she took one sip after another to fulfill her satisfaction. Soon, the surroundings started to rise, and the warmth of spring had come to replace the extreme, miserable cold. Relieved, they were glad that they finally had a cure for the god of demons' obsession for wine. Perhaps the wizardry barrier could finally be removed, and they could leave this bloody place. What a great wine! The lady sighed in delight. Abruptly, she waved her sleeves in the air as the pink candle dragon let out a long, high-pitched cry. After so many years, the gate was finally open for the first time. A giant whirlpool suddenly came into view, and Gushijio was taken away by the turbulence. Gushijio honestly thought that the whirlpool would lead her all the way out of the desert. She was looking forward to seeing the flying serpent. However, she was trapped in the turbulence for quite some time before she landed in another part of the world where she had never been. Chapter 2998. A demonic transformation, the flying serpent had a tough time waiting for her. Gu Shijio wanted it to stay outside the desert. However, it could not stop worrying about her. In fact, it had already tried to contact her not long after Gu Shijio ventured into the desert, but the connection could never get through. Fortunately, Gu Shijio had warned it about the oddities of the desert. She had already suspected that there would be a barrier to hinder all means of communication with the outside world, so it would be normal that their calls would not go through. Therefore, with the information it was given, it patiently waited. The first day passed by. Then, another 2 days passed. Gu Shijio never sent any messages and did not show up. Hence, the flying serpent stood outside the desert like a statue, waiting for her return. It was not ready to tell Di Fui about what had happened as he was occupied with his tasks. Too many places were left unexplored, so it did not want to burden him as there was no guarantee that Di Hao was in this desert. It could only wait and hope that Gu Shijio could make it out within 5 days. Nevertheless, the constant expansion of the desert was one of its many concerns. The entrance of the desert used to be further away from the city. In fact, it was thousands of miles away. The extreme heat of the desert managed to keep people away, except for the friars who volunteered to behead the evil creatures that were rumored to exist. Besides them, there was hardly anyone who passed by, at least for the past 3 days when the flying serpent was there. Although it was commonly known that the desert was expanding, the rate of expansion was uncertain. Since the flying serpent was standing by the entrance for a few days, it was able to monitor the condition of the desert. From its observation, it found that the desert would expand by a few miles a day. Also, the temperature would rise day by day. As a fire element majestic beast, the flying serpent was supposed to be able to flourish in the heat. However, it found the heat there to be unbearable. During its patient wait at the border, it came across a couple that was ready to venture into the desert. The man was not very young. Sot-hair love must have happened much later in his life. Perhaps it was something that his children were strongly against. To receive blessings on their union, the couple was ready to take a risk in the name of love, in hopes that the king and their families would finally grant them with eternal blessings. Apart from romance, the man was also determined to find out more about the desert. He wanted to do something for society in his lifetime. However, as soon as they approached the entrance, they were immediately dumbstruck by the extreme heat wave. Their spiritual power was obviously too low to withstand the flaming temperatures on the inside. In an instant, both of them were thoroughly burned by the abnormally hot temperature. Without the flying serpent's help, they would already be dead. Fortunately, the couple was very knowledgeable, despite their ordinary kung fu. In particular, the woman's family business was sustained due to the knowledge that they shared with their customers. As the head of her family, she could turn anything into an erudite sharing, with things that were uncommonly known by the general public. From the lady, the flying serpent got to know a lot of things about the desert. The desert came into existence many thousands of years ago. It was formed out of thin air. At first, it was about the size of a small town, secured with an impenetrable wizardry barrier. The desert did not bother the primitive inhabitants during the early days, so no one cared about it. For the thousands of years that followed, the desert maintained its size and did not interfere with the lives of the people who lived nearby. However, about 20,000 years ago, the desert began its unstoppable expansion, along with the rise in temperature. Only lovers were permitted to enter, but they had no way out. The flying serpent found the story quite unpleasant. As a majestic beast that was at least 10,000 years old, it had come across many strange happenings in its life. It knew at once that the oddity of the desert could only be explained by the existence of an extremely wicked being that was sealed within the desert. It must have become fully active about 20,000 years ago. The old couple knew that they were going to die in the desert if they insisted on the daring journey. Therefore, after a chat with the flying serpent, they decided to abandon their mission and left. It was only on the 3rd day that a sudden change happened. Chapter 2999, A Demonic Transformation 2. On that night, a hurricane screamed from within the desert, taking tons of yellow sand along with it. Rapidly, it expanded and started traveling at a speed of 50 miles per hour. It did not take long before it swept across the closest town and destroyed the entire place that was occupied by thousands of people. The people who saw it in time abandoned their homes and started running for life. However, those ordinary people could not travel fast enough to escape the disaster, especially those with children and elderly people in their families. Unfortunately, many of them could not escape their fate of being swallowed by the hurricane of sand. People of other cities heard about the tragedy that struck and panicked. Many packed their bags and left too, so it was rather chaotic. The flying serpent saw their misery and wanted to help. It wanted to help them flee from the violent storm, but they were terrified by its appearance. The more it wanted to help, the worse the situation turned out to be. In the end, the flying serpent could only stand aside and watch as these people vanished in the sand. It was as if the world was coming to an end. Meanwhile, the flying serpent finally figured it all out. It seemed that the desert had transformed into a demonic being. At the rate of its growth, the desert would swallow the entire continent in less than a month and would fall into the territory of the demon. Could the desert's sudden transformation be related to Gu Shijio? What happened to her? Is she still safe? The flying serpent had many unanswered questions. It was trying to decide if it should go against Gu Zijia's instructions and contact Di Fui in advance before their 5-day plan expired. To its surprise, Di Fui called first. Di Fui's voice was a little hoarse, which was an apparent display of his exhaustion. "Baby, do you have any news?" he asked gently. The flying serpent was definitely not used to his loving gestures. "Young master, it is I," it said with a trembling voice. Di Fui was at a loss for words. He and Gu Shijio had to cover different continents on their own to find Di Hao quickly, so they needed a unique directed audio spell to stay in touch. The amulet was difficult to make and hard to control, which often required a large amount of spiritual power. Also, it was a single-use spell, so they would not usually call one another unless it was for something urgent. They would normally only call each other once every 6 days, as they each only carried 10 devices. The call would not even last more than a minute before it lost its function. Before Gu Shijio ventured into the desert, she gave one piece away to the flying serpent so that it could contact Di Fui if needed. Di Fui thought that Gu Shijio had the amulet with her, which was why he decided to go ahead and address her as baby. So, as soon as he heard the flying serpent, all of his patience faded. "Where is she? What is going on? Tell me everything, as fast as you can." Intimidated, the flying serpent quickly briefed him about its current situation. The flying serpent was clearly ineloquent, but managed to wrap up everything that was happening in a clear summary. "Young master, Madam is probably fighting with a devil being now in the desert. It must be a tough fight, which prompted the desert to expand very frantically. Do you think that could be the case? It needed some hints. Tell me your exact location. I'm going there now," Di Fui harshly said. The flying serpent told him its location, only to receive a hiss of disapproval from Bai Zhe. So far away, Bai Zhe would not usually complain about the distance, so when it did, they must be really far apart. Di Fui might take days to arrive, and all would be too late by then. Chapter 3000. A Demonic Transformation 3. The flying serpent was left dumbfounded when Di Fui arrived in less than a day. At that time, the desert had stretched out an additional 2,000 miles and had swallowed hundreds of cities, included a country. It had devoured hundreds of thousands of living creatures and people. Even though some places had not been engulfed yet, they were already on fire because of the raging heat coming from the desert. The forest was dry, and the fields were deserted. Meanwhile, the volcanoes were active. It felt like the continent was experiencing the end of the world. The people were feeling helpless and desperate for a way out. No one could even go close to the desert now to try and stop it. Any stones that were miles away from it had exploded or melted. Naturally, the flying serpent was concerned for the people. As it started to panic, Di Fui and Bai Zhe had arrived. Di Fui rarely looked messy, so his long sweaty hair made him look rather weird. As for Bai Zhe, it looked even worse. It looked like a fish that was just retrieved from muddy water. The bright satin-like silver hair it had seemed to be missing. Instead, it was wet and muddy to the point where even its eyelashes were stained with sweat. As soon as they landed, Bai Zhe was panting vigorously. It seemed to be on the brink of vomiting. When the flying serpent saw them, it immediately went forward and wanted to report the situation here. But before it could say anything, Di Fui had gone straight to the entrance to the desert. I will go in and see what is happening. Two of you continue to guard the outside. Before our people arrive, do not let anyone else enter. Bai Zhe will tell you what to do next. Even while he was talking, he was already rushing into the boiling desert. Although the flying serpent was still worried, it did not dare to question his instructions. It looked at Bai Zhe and asked, "Where did you both come from?" Bai Zhe was still breathless as he uttered the name of the place. Needless to say, the flying serpent was shocked. "So far, how did you manage to rush here?" As far as it knew, it took at least 6 days to get here from the mainland, and they actually arrived in less than a day. Master had used the space reduction technique for us to travel through space. Bai Zhe was panting and still in shock. He was desperate. The flying serpent was speechless. The space reduction technique was banned and extremely risky. If someone lost focus while using it, they could find themselves in a black hole and banish from existence. According to what the flying serpent knew, its master had only used this technique twice. This was rather dangerous, as Di Fui was certainly not a master in the technique. Nevertheless, desperate times called for desperate measures. No wonder even someone as powerful as Di Fui could look so messy. Despite the speed at which they were traveling, Di Fui had also contacted his subordinates scattered around the 6 realms. He ordered them to come to this mainland, as there were certain tasks that he needed them to do. Mu Feng and the 3 messengers, the 4 mythical beasts, people from Shura World SEAL team like Feng Ruhua, Kuan Shui, Yun Yanli, and even the Emperor from the Immortal World had also received his request for help. They were all on their way here. After Bai Zhe informed the flying serpent about the plan, its eyes widened. Such a big movement? Does that mean all the masters from the 6 realms will be gathered here? Bai Zhe sounds dignified. Of course, in the past, the devils were all individuals. Hence, the harm they could inflict was always limited, no matter how powerful they were. However, this entire desert has turned into a demon. By looking at its trend, it soon will swallow the entire continent and turn the whole continent evil. If that were to happen, its power would be limitless. Chapter 3001. A demonic transformation. For once it takes this continent, it will continue to swallow the surrounding continents at a faster rate. Eventually, it will probably swallow the entire universe. Therefore, everyone has to cooperate in dealing with this catastrophe. The flying serpent remained silent. It could not help but look up at the desert one more time. The color of the desert was quite weird at the moment. It was black, but also revealed some auspicious golden lights around it. What demon was it that was sealed in this desert? Did it actually have so much power? Di Fui rushed into the desert. The situation inside was obviously going to be very frantic, as it was no longer only restricted to couples. The desert was expanding crazily and simply absorbed anyone into it. However, the temperature inside was too hot. Hence, all those with low spiritual power would immediately burst into flames and became part of the sand. Di Fui had a protective barrier around his body, so he was not afraid of the heat and fire. Swiftly, he landed on the ground and analyzed his surroundings. He was expecting something horrible given the information he had about the place. However, after he entered, it was actually a magnificent scenery. There were mountains, flowing water, flowers, and even trees. Furthermore, the air was fresh. Di Fui, who was always calm, was now stunned as he did not expect anything like this on the inside. He had landed on a large hill with peach trees planted on the hillside. It was the season for peach blossoms. So, pink peaches could be seen everywhere. From afar, they looked like large pink clouds. There was a stream of flowing water under the slope. Fallen flower petals danced upon the surface of the water as it floated down the river. Some were scattered around, and some were gathered in clusters. There was a hidden green canopy inside the peach grove. A silver bell was hanging on the roof and ringing in the wind. Difui paused for a moment when he saw the green canopy. Everything here felt familiar to him, as if he had heard someone mentioned about this place before. Of course, he could not remember who mentioned it to him, but the feeling was surreal. He thought about it for a while and then headed to the peach grove. Suddenly, he stopped. On a peach tree not far ahead of him, a woman dressed in green was lying on a branch and drinking liquor. She looked a bit casual. Some of her hair seemed to be tangled on the branch while the rest fell on her shoulder. Her eyes were bright, and her lips were red. She definitely looked stunning. It was Gu Shijio. Apparently, she was laying leisurely in the tree. She seemed to have sensed something and turned her eyes to look at Difui. When she saw his face clearly, she immediately smiled at him like a blossoming flower and jumped down from the tree. Fui, you are finally here. She opened her arms and rushed over to him. Difui sighed with relief and raised his hand to hold her. Are you okay? Come, let me check if you're injured. He quickly sized her up as they drew closer to one another. Gu Zijia's pretty face blushed as she watched him gaze at her. However, her eyes seemed to shine even brighter. On the surface, she seemed very healthy. It was unlikely that she had suffered from any injury. Difui held her hand and sat side by side with her under the peach tree. What is the situation here? How is Hao-Er? Did you find him? Gu Shijio shook her head slightly. Hao-Er is not here. I'm stuck in here. After I came in, I couldn't seem to find a way out. Fortunately, things here aren't too bad. I built a temporary house here for shelter. Come, let me show you the house. Let me know if it suits your taste. Then, the two of them walked side by side toward the depths of the peach grove. Chapter 3002. The inner demon, the courtyard that was covered by peach blossoms, was finally revealed in its entirety. There was a small area surrounded by yellow mud and a green plant that looked like a Boston ivy. Pale purple flowers could be seen scattered around the plants. They looked delicate and intriguing at the same time. There were several kinds of plantains in the vicinity, along with grass and leaves. A large stone was standing in the middle of the yard. The big rock looked unadorned with moss growing all over it. There was also rattan entangled on it with the same purple flower growing all over it. As for the only green brick house in the courtyard, it was even more stylish. The windows were octagonal with peach blossoms designed on them. In short, this courtyard was rustic and elegant, mixed with a bit of a farmhouse style. It looked like the courtyard of a hermit. Fui, isn't this yard pretty? Gu Shijio was holding Difui's arm, and he asked him excitedly. Difui looked around and nodded his head. It is great. Shijio, I never knew that you were so talented in decorating a courtyard. Gu Shijio smiled happily and sounded proud. Of course, this is actually my dream house. It is elegant and warm. It was indeed exquisite and warm to the point where an elegant person like Difui could not even fault it. He had always decorated the place where he and Gu Shijio lived. Usually, Gu Shijio would not get herself involved in the matter. As long as she could live comfortably, she always gave recognition to his taste. In fact, she typically did not want to get herself involved. Of course, Difui had also given her opportunities to leave her mark on their living space. After finding ways to trick her into getting involved, she finally agreed to design something. However, the courtyard she designed made Difui laugh out loud. His ridicule of her design certainly made her angry. Consequently, she did not allow him to touch her body for a month. For the sake of his own sexual well-being, Difui did not fall for the same trap again. Nevertheless, looking at the layout of this house, he would even consider it as a masterpiece. Did she hide her talent before, or? Difui could not help but continue to praise the design of the place from time to time as he walked through the place. Gu Shijio followed him from behind and was practically glowing with all the songs of praises she received. She could not help but ask him, "Do you like it?" Difui nodded. "I like it. Shijio, I didn't expect you to have such a talent. In the past, you were not very good at these sorts of things. Gu Shijio raised her eyebrows, but said proudly, as long as I am willing to work hard, there is nothing that I cannot do. In the past, I just wasn't very interested in such things. But when I put in the effort, I know I can master anything. I am your wife, and you are outstanding in this respect. So, I cannot let myself fall too far behind. Di Fui smiled and tapped her little hand. You have improved a lot. However, you used to say that a husband and wife should complement each other. I am outstanding in this respect. So you should not be good at it, right? So that you can give me all the authority in this respect to avoid any difference in opinions and disagreements. At that time, you were very firm about this and justified it very well. Gu Shijio was a little embarrassed. It was because I didn't learn it well, so I gave you excuses to avoid being embarrassed in front of you. Chapter 3003 The Inner Demon 2. The two of them chatted for a while, and Di Fui teased her about some of her bad habits. She also laughed at him because of his fussiness and obsessive-compulsive disorder. The pair looked very warm together as they exchanged pleasantries. They looked just like an ordinary husband and wife. Subconsciously, the two strolled into the dormitory, and the layout in the room was even more elegant. Whether it was the wooden window shade or the big bed with ink lotus painting on the net that covered, everything amazed Di Fui. The room was initially a bit dark, but Gu Shijio flicked her finger, and candlelight lit up in the room. Di Fui looked at the burning candle and was stunned for a moment. The candle was no ordinary candle. It was a pair of big wedding candles that were engraved with dragons and phoenixes. Ordinary candles were usually only stamped with images of dragons and phoenixes. Meanwhile, these candles were craftily engraved. The candle with a phoenix was engraved with a colorful phoenix flying in the starry sky. The stars dotted on it were like the real, shimmering stars under the light. On the candle with the dragon, there was a geographical map of Qianquan with mountains, rivers, people, immortals, demons, and beasts, among other things. The dragon was circling the candle as if it was flying above the 6 realms. Those candles were definitely a unique product. When they were lit up, the fire that emerged was golden red, reflecting the whole house into a red wedding room. Di Fui looked at the pair of candles and then looked back at her. This is very rare. Where did you get it? He then looked around the room and sighed. This arrangement feels a bit like a newly married couple's room. Do you like it? Gu Shijio asked. Yes. Di Fui's eyes flashed as he answered. Gu Shijio returned his reply with a smile. It was a smile of satisfaction. Her smile was very pure, indicating that his fondness for a masterpiece made her genuinely happy. In fact, I had long wanted to arrange a newlywed room like this when we were married, but unfortunately, I have been unable to achieve my wish. I did not expect to do so over here. This is actually how I would like my room. She turned around with her arms opened, and her clothes fluttered in the wind. She looked dazzling under the rare candlelight. Di Fui seemed to be distracted by her beauty as he watched her. All of a sudden, she tripped over her skirt and fell to his arms. Di Fui raised his hand and caught her. What's wrong? Apparently, Gu Shijio did not anticipate that the man would be so lost. She stepped on his foot and remarked, silly. Di Fui was speechless. He looked at her and asked in a serious tone, What do you mean? Gu Shijio slightly bit her lip as she continued. I think we can treat this as our wedding room. What do you think? Di Fui seemed to be confused. Shijio, we have been married for a long time. Our kids are already grown up. Gu Shijio was stunned and rather unhappy that he could not catch the hint. We can treat it like we have just gotten married again. After all, we have just been reunited after being separated for so long. Di Fui looked down at the ground as he replied, You are right. We have been separated for more than 2 months. Gu Shijio raised her eyebrows at his reply. Fui, did you make a mistake? We have only been separated for 28 days, not 2 months. Di Fui was stunned by the reply he received. It's hard for me to remember it correctly. Sigh. A day without you feels like a few years for me. We have not been seeing each other for 28 days, but it feels like 20 years. His voice was soft and magnetic as he asked her, Shijio, if we were getting married again, it would have to be a little bit grander. Unfortunately, I did not prepare the wedding gown. Chapter 3004. The Inner Demon 3. I have prepared it. Gu Shijio took out a set of bridal clothing from her body, as if performing a magic trick. I have wanted to wear this set for a long time. Di Fui's sight fell on the wedding dress. He did not know why, but in his heart, he felt that the dress looked very familiar. The wedding dress was woven with mermaid silk and covered with bright blue gems on it that looked like stars. It actually formed a starry sky pattern on it. The attire looked luxurious, exquisite, and majestic. It was so beautiful that it was sure to capture anyone's attention and keep their eyes on the dress. Di Fui held his breath. He did not know why, but seeing this suit made him feel as though a fine needle was suddenly stuck into his heart. It was sore and swollen for a moment. He could not help but raise his hand to touch the dress. The mermaid silk definitely made its texture very smooth. It was like holding the gentle moonlight in his hand. Can I wear it and show you? Gu Shijio looked at him eagerly. Her bright eyes seemed to be filled with countless stars, captivating anyone to look a little deeper. Okay. Di Fui nodded as if he was hypnotized. She is a fake. Gu Shijio squatted in the yellow sand. Her face was pale as she watched the illusion in the sky with her fists tightly clenched. She felt that she must have been having a nightmare. Unfortunately, there seemed to be no way to wake herself up. After she got out of the vortex that carried her away, she found that she did not actually leave the desert, but fell into an ice field with a lot of whirlpools. The ice field was deadly cold to the point where she had to run her spiritual power down to expel the chillness. She looked around, but could not see her son or Fan Qianshi. Instead, she found an igloo. There was a woman in white sitting inside the igloo. Gu Shijio recognized this woman as the moody demon in the desert, but an auspicious light now surrounded her, and there was no trace of the demon's spirit from before. The woman seemed to be waiting for someone in this igloo, as she would always look out from time to time. Gu Shijio soon found a problem. Even though the woman kept looking out the igloo, she did not seem to notice Gu Shijio at all. She watched the woman's eyes from a distance, and could feel a sense of sorrow within her. Gu Shijio took 2 steps forward and almost stood right in front of her. Yet, the woman still did not seem to see her. She just sighed as she said, "It seems that he is not coming." Her voice was soft and seemed to carry a sense of disappointment. Then, she took a piece of paper out of nowhere and started to write on it. Gu Shijio continued to watch her and was rather stunned by everything. Everything seemed so familiar to her, as if it had once happened in her own life. She watched the woman write a few lines of words, and then irritably scrunched the paper into a ball and threw it around the igloo. The woman would look outside at the snow and sigh. In fact, this is also good. I came here barefoot and will leave barefoot. I have nothing to worry about. However, I do feel sad. Why am I sad? I really want to see him again, even if it is just for a drink. The woman looked very lost and very bleak at that point. Just watching everything unravel from the side already made Gu Shijio feel a pain in her chest. Intuitively, she wanted to hug the woman. However, as soon as she took a step closer, her vision appeared like the swirling of a kaleidoscope. It seems that she stepped into the whirlpool again. Once the colorful scene receded, she found herself falling into an antique restaurant. The place was filled with people who were dressed rather quaintly, unlike any ethnic group she had recognized before. Published at 24th of May, 2020, 9 o'clock and 7 seconds a.m., Chapter 3005. 3005 there. She saw the woman in white again. The woman sat in the corner of the restaurant and ordered a table full of dishes. She had a few drinks over dinner, too. Sponsored content remove ads. Gu Shiju looked at the dishes that the woman had chosen, and although there were many dishes she did not recognize, she inexplicably felt that she would enjoy them very much. Aside from that, she was also puzzled why the woman had ordered so much food. The amount of food she had on her table was probably enough to feed 10 people. She not only ate a large table of dishes, but also drank more than 10 jars of wines. Even watching her from the side was enough to make Gu Shijio feel full. Another oddity that struck Gu Shijio was that the woman in white was in her appearance at the restaurant. A peerless beauty was eating and drinking in a commoner's restaurant, so naturally it attracted a lot of attention. There were even a few lechers eagerly waiting for the woman to get drunk. Gu Shijio frowned at the sight of the men. She understood that everything she was seeing was an illusion, but she was not sure if it had actually happened or if it was something that the god of demons wanted her to see. Generally, Gu Shijio was not a person who could be easily moved by her emotions, but she felt that she could quickly feel the mood of the woman in white at the moment. Sponsored content remove ads? The woman's heart was empty, and she wanted to fill it up with something. She seemed to be afraid of being alone, too, as seen by her choice to dine in a crowded place instead of a private room. Once the woman in white was full, she got up and left. It was then that a few lechers dragged her into an alley. The lechers wanted to take advantage of her. They said a lot of spiteful words to tease her. She was obviously drunk, so when they teased her, she did not seem to catch what they were saying and also responded very slowly. One of them even placed their hand on her shoulder and said frivolously, "Little girl, does nobody want you? You look like you have been abandoned. Why don't you marry me and be my concubine?" This action had crossed a line because the woman in white began to look annoyed. Sponsored content remove ads? In a matter of seconds, the 4 lechers were punished for their actions. The woman had beaten them up and even disfigured their bodies. Before they knew it, the 4 of them were already dead. At this point, the woman's dark eyes had turned faintly red. She stood by the wall and ignored the 4 dead people lying on the ground in the alley. All of a sudden, she seemed to raise her hand to her chest, as if abruptly realizing something. "It is strange. I have obviously eaten so much. How am I still hungry?" She then stumbled away, but certainly left Gu Shijio stunned. She could see that the woman in white was a god, but she already had the heart of a demon. The demon inside her had made her kill the 4 men, but since she was drunk, she did not even realize it. It was very dangerous for a god to have an inner demon. If the demon were to gain control over her body, the consequences would be terrifying. Gu Shijio slightly bit her lip as she understood that this was her past life. Sponsored content remove ads? Regardless of whether the god of demons deliberately wanted to show her these scenes, or if she saw it by mistake, there could be something she could learn from the visuals. As often said, knowing yourself and knowing the enemy was the key to winning a battle. Once she knew the origin of the other party, she could think of a way to deal with her. Therefore, Gu Shijio took a step in the direction of the woman, and after another whirl, she found herself falling back into the desert. She was stunned for a moment, as she did not know if she had awakened from her illusion or if she was still stuck inside. She looked around and quickly found that the desert was not the desert that the god of the demons had made. The desert seemed very ordinary, but the sun in the sky was poisonous. Nevertheless, it was still within the limits of human beings, so they would not die. She still did not see Di Hao or Fan Qianshi anywhere. The same could be said for Little Pink and Little Black. She only saw a vast land filled with yellow sand. While she was trying to find her bearings, she suddenly saw purple clouds in the sky and multiple lightning strikes that flashed through the clouds. She immediately felt uneasy as she recognized that it was the catastrophic thunderbolts from the gods. As she looked up, she saw the woman in white in the clouds along with a man standing in front of her. In an instant, Gu Shijio felt as if someone had slammed her head really hard. It was Di Fui. He was experiencing a catastrophe with the woman in white. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 3006. Removing the inner demon, he was wearing a dark purple robe that looked ancient and had cast an anti-thunderbolt spell that emerged from his hands. The spell was foreign to Gu Shijio, and so was the catastrophe. Gu Shijio had never seen such a violent catastrophe before. It seemed to have the power to destroy the earth. The two of them would likely be turned into debris. From her observation, Di Fui's skill was insufficient to resist the catastrophe thunderbolts above their heads. If the woman had not cast an additional spell on him, he would only have been able to endure 3 thunderbolts at most. While they were experiencing the catastrophe, it seemed that Di Fui had passed out and had his eyes closed. As a result, he did not see the woman cast a spell on him to keep him safe. He also did not see the woman clearly struggling to keep them alive. Her face went ashen very quickly, and her white dress was stained with blood. 9 thunderbolts struck each of them, and Gu Shijio saw that the woman in white had cast a spell to clean the mess on her body the moment they had passed the catastrophe. Therefore, when Di Fui opened his eyes, he had only realized that her face had turned pale. Everything else looked normal. Knowing Di Fui, he would obviously check on her. "Are you okay?" "I am okay. You can go now." The woman in white waved her hand to dismiss him. Di Fui went 1 step closer to her and said, "Let me check your pulse." The woman in white shook her hand and rushed him away. Her voice was cold and cruel. "You and I have nothing to do with one another anymore. You don't need to see me again." Then, the woman in white teleported and disappeared. Gu Shijio was not able to catch a glimpse of Di Fui's reaction as the scene in front of her changed abruptly. She seemed to be in the depths of the Gobi Desert. There were numerous large boulders in the area, but they all seemed to carry a dark aura around them. The woman in white was breathlessly leaning on a large stone. Her forehead was filled with sweat, but there was frost on her eyelashes. Meanwhile, blood flowed down her lips, and even after she wiped most of it away, the stream of blood did not seem to stop, so she simply gave up on cleaning it. It looked as though she was trying to manage her breathing. From time to time, she used her fingers to cast some spells on her own body. However, the auspicious light around her seemed to be fading. It looked weak, as if it was going to dissipate soon. She looked up at the sun in the sky and hugged her arms as she said, "It's so cold. Why does it feel like winter, even with the sun hanging in the sky?" "It is so weak." Gu Shijio stood next to her and shook her head. She could feel that the temperature in the desert was actually quite hot. It was about 33 to 34 degrees Celsius. Although it was not very hot, it was certainly not cold. It was at this moment that Gu Shijio was more certain that this woman should be her past self. It turned out that she had such deep entanglements with Di Fui, even in her previous life. Her gaze suddenly fell on the shadow of the woman in white that lingered on the ground. There were actually 2 shadows on the ground. One was normal, but the other one was like a snake circling her. As it hovered, the woman seemed to have black smoke circling her too. Was this the inner demon of the woman? Gu Shijio looked at the hovering shadow carefully and was shocked. Due to her extensive knowledge, she knew for a fact that everyone had an inner demon, even a Buddha. However, it was usually suppressed and purified, and it would not appear at all. It was only when there was extreme regret, hatred, or dissatisfaction in a human's heart that the spirit of their body would be extremely weak. At that time, the inner demon would appear and take control of their body. The inner demon would always confuse their victim as it took control over their body. At this moment, the woman's inner demon was obviously tempting her. Chapter 3007. Removing the Inner Demon 2. At this moment, the woman's inner demon was obviously tempting her in her mind, and her black eyes would suddenly flash red from time to time. The woman in white kept casting spells on herself, presumably trying to suppress the inner demon. Nonetheless, she could not succeed. The twisted shadow on the ground was getting more and more powerful by the second. It climbed from her feet to her waist. Gu Shijio understood that once the shadow reached her face, it would have complete control over this body. From then on, it would belong to the demon. All of a sudden, she heard a conversation in her ear. "You like him. Why don't you tell him? Why did you let him dismiss the discipleship and undergo the catastrophe?" "No, I can't like him. I'm going to die soon anyway." Those thunderbolts just brought the date forward by 1 to 2 years at most. It's useless to tell him how I feel. I don't want him to suffer once I am gone. You are so good to him, but he is so cold to you. You only delayed the wedding for 1 hour to rescue your apprentice, but he did not even forgive you. He refused to see you for a few years, and when he did, he forced you to dismiss his relationship with you. Apparently, he did not want to be your apprentice for another second. In the end, he was too lazy to take care of you. He did not even want to have a farewell drink with you. He did not care about you at all. I don't want him to care about me. It's good that he didn't fall for me. That way, I don't have to feel sad even when I die. I am actually pleased that things turn out this way. You are lying to yourself. You are very sad. Your heart is hurting. It hurts like a fire is burning you up from the inside. No, the catastrophic thunderbolts injured me. Huh, you don't even dare to speak your thoughts. Are you still the god of creation? This conversation had a significant impact on Gu Shijio. She was stunned just hearing everything that was said. God of creation. Was she the god of creation in her previous life? And was Di Fui her apprentice, whose wedding was delayed? Had she almost married Di Fui? Who was her apprentice in her previous life? Who did she try to save that ended up delaying the wedding for an hour and caused Di Fui to end things with her? Why did they break up so easily? Too many things were going on at once to the point where she could not collect her thoughts. Just as she was trying to gather more clues from the conversation, she saw the black shadow circled around the chest of the woman in white. Let me do it. Let me control this body. I will find him and tell him your true thoughts. You like him so much. Both of you could have been a pair, right? The voice of the demon was full of temptations as it inched up little by little. The woman's eyes seemed to face forward, as if she were being controlled suddenly. She was still trying to cast some spells to suppress the demon, but her fingers suddenly stopped, and her arms fell to her sides. She seemed to have conceded as she muttered, "Could we have been a pair? But I have my mission." "Forget about your mission. Forget about your apprentice, Fan Qianshi. You have left enough for him and even gave him a candle dragon's egg. You have taught him how to read the starry map and equipped him with all the skills he needs to assume your role. Furthermore, all the materials in the forbidden place are sufficient to allow him to become the successor of the god of creation. You have treated him well. You should think about yourself now. Are you willing to die just like this? What can I do even if I am not willing? I am going to die soon. Why do I have to confess my feelings to him and make him sad?" Chapter 3008. Removing the Inner Demon. 3. In fact, you don't have to die. You only need to kill Fan Qianshi in the next 4 hours and eat his heart. That way, you will be able to extend your life. Anyway, he is just your apprentice, and you have done enough for him. Moreover, you had saved his life before. It is reasonable for him to give up his life to you. Eat his heart, and you can live for another 10 years. You could spend a decade with Di Fui. Don't you want to wear the wedding attire that he prepared for his lover? Don't you want to see him wearing his real groom's attire? As long as you do what I say, you can achieve these aspirations. Perhaps the woman in white was truly contemplating those thoughts. It seemed that she was no longer trying to suppress it. The demon had found a way through to her and continued its ascent to her head. By then, the black smoke had already reached her chin. Gu Shijio remained silent. Although the demon was now controlling most of the woman's movements, she somehow felt that the woman in white had a hidden attack up her sleeve. Sure enough, she noticed that the woman in white made a sudden move. Her finger swiftly went straight for her own chest. Gu Shijio heard a loud screech as a pale white figure wrapped in black smoke was ripped out from the woman's body. The screams did not stop as the woman repeatedly cast more spells on herself to extract the demon. A yellow light seemed to cover the pale shadow from head to toe, preventing it from returning into Gu Zijia's body. The pale figure was obviously her inner demon. Its face was still a little fuzzy, but its body was very similar to the woman in white. Needless to say, the inner demon had not seen this coming. It looked shocked. You actually removed me from your body. How is that even possible?" The woman in white was obviously in pain. Her face was terribly pale, and her white dress was completely stained with blood. She could not stand upright and was already swaying, but she kept her eyes on the inner demon the entire time. I am the god of creation. How can a little inner demon like you control me? I have long known your existence. I knew that once I am weak, you will definitely come out to cause me trouble. Thus, I have thought of how to settle you in advance, and I had already prepared a spell for you. However, this spell can only be triggered when you climb up to my head. So, I've been waiting for it to happen. The inner demon remained silent. But I knew all your thoughts. How were you able to conceal it from me? The inner demon could not understand. I had practiced this many times when I was free. I am already very familiar with it, so I didn't even have to think about it. I was emptying my mind just now. Didn't you notice it? The demon was speechless. I never expect you to be so cruel. I am cruel to everyone, including myself. The woman in white sounded calm, but her words were rather domineering. Okay, you can rest in peace here until the day you completely disappear. Once the woman in white uttered that last sentence, she began to practice at once. Then, she opened a hole in the air, resembling a portal, and threw the demon covered in a yellow wizardry barrier into the hole. Gu Shijio, who was forced to watch everything unfold from the side, remained silent. Her eyes seemed to follow the inner demon subconsciously, and once it went into the portal, her vision turned black. As her sight returned to her, she found herself still in the desert. Dihao and Fan Qianshi were now around her. Meanwhile, the woman in white seemed to have black smoke circling her as she stood in front of Gu Shijio. She seemed proud as if she had achieved something. Shijio, how did you feel when you saw everything? You have watched the pain I suffered from the separation from you in your past life. I have been imprisoned in this desert for 100,000 years and suffered from the heat and cold. Can you imagine my luck today? Today, you've finally fallen into my hands. Chapter 3009. You have talked too much. The woman in white's voice sounded very sinister. Nevertheless, Gu Shijio heaved a sigh and ignored her. She looked at her son first to check on him and felt relieved. Next, she glanced at Fan Qianshi, who was also watching her. The two looked at each other for a moment before Gu Shijio decided to look away. The sight of the man was enough to send discomfort to her stomach. Apparently, the man that she had wanted to kill all this while was her apprentice in her past life. It seemed that she used to care about this apprentice in her previous life, and she had undoubtedly sacrificed a lot for him. The revelation struck her like a thunderbolt. Nonetheless, it was evident that the catastrophic thunderbolt from the illusion were far worse than the one she imagined right now. Too many things were revealed in such a short period of time that she had not been able to digest everything. She had not had time to think clearly about the situation and could not be bothered with Fan Qianshi for now. Then, her gaze returned to the woman in white. In the illusion, this demon was just a pale shadow. Even her facial features were not fully formed. But now, she looked exactly like Gu Shijio in her past life and carried an auspicious aura around her, as though she was the god of creation. However, it was clear that the aura she carried was tinged with dark magic. Its magical power was already at its peak, so Gu Shijio was not considered as its opponent in her current state. How many years have you been locked up in this desert? Gu Shijio suddenly asked. The demon was stunned and did not seem to expect that question to come first since Gu Shijio had seen so much of her past. It was already amazed by the fact that she could maintain her composure. However, the question seemed rather irrelevant, given that there were much bigger problems at hand. The woman in white stepped closer to Gu Shijio as she asked, "Are you not afraid?" Her voice was cold. Gu Shijio replied, "Will it help if I am afraid?" To which the demon laughed. "Indeed, it is useless. Your skills are not as good as mine now, and you are my territory. Other than accepting your fate, there is no way out for you." The woman drew closer to Gu Shijio, and the magical aura around the body felt immensely cold. Gu Shijio could feel the cold despite being some distance away. She felt as though a snake had wrapped itself around her. Intuitively, She took a step back and secretly utilized her martial arts to circulate warmth around her body. In just a moment, the coldness was forced out of her body. Meanwhile, the demons sized her up as though she could see through the flesh of her victims. After a while, she laughed. You are just a little immortal that has been cultivating for 100 years. I didn't expect you to reincarnate in such a weak being. Gu Shijio also laughed, but her voice was cold when she replied, Even if I am weak, I am in my original body. No matter how strong you are just an inner demon. As far as I know, no matter how strong an inner demon is, it would not be stronger than the person in its original body and cannot do anything to destroy the original body. The demon's facial expression changed at once as it coldly said, Stop dreaming. Do you think I am just your inner demon? She raised her sleeves and continued, I am no longer just the demon who you tricked and drew out from your body in the past. In fact, I will get back everything that I have lost in that year, including your current husband, Di Fui. I love him the most. I turned into a demon because of him, but he actually married you, a woman who is so weak. You don't deserve him. You didn't deserve him even in your previous life. Gu Shijio was speechless. Why did everyone like her husband so much? Even this demonic being was actually his fangirl. Gu Shijio smiled slightly, and she answered, It's good that you like him. The demon stared at her as she asked, Are you not jealous? Gu Shijio responded leisurely, There are too many women who like him. If I am jealous of everyone, I will become the queen of jealousy. However, when many women like him, it proves that he is good enough to be my husband and also proves that my taste is very good. I am pleased. Published at 26th of May, 2020, 2:50 and 7 seconds a.m., Chapter 3010. 3010 The Demon was speechless. Sponsored content remove ads? She squinted her eyes at Gu Shijio and smiled coldly. It seems that you think no one can take him away from you. Are you so confident? Of course. Gu Shijio answered very firmly. The demon smiled leisurely as she continued. Others may not be able to do the job, but I can, because I used to be you, and I am much better than you right now. Gu Shijio chuckled. Apparently, she did not believe it. Do you not believe it? Well, I will show you and let you see it with your own eyes. Perhaps that is what it will take to shatter your spirits. The last message managed to catch Gu Zijia's attention. How did this woman in white intend to shatter her spirits? Sponsored content remove ads? It did not take long for Gu Shijio to understand what the demon had meant. The demon actually created a shady screen with a wave of her sleeve. The scene looked incredibly realistic with grass and trees scattered everywhere. Even the brick walls were all very clear. Perhaps one could say that it looked more realistic than an HD TV. The area was filled with peach blossoms and appeared to be surrounded by mountains and rivers. The peach blossom trees were all over the place, and it revealed the corner of a green roof building in it. Nevertheless, despite the stunning details, none of them were actually very important. The most important thing was that she saw Di Fui. She also saw the inner demon, who was now dressed in green. Gu Zijia's eyes fell on Di Fui, and her heart sank a little. Sponsored content remove ads? Di Fui was wearing a very special purple robe. Although this purple robe was the style he often wore, it had a star embroidered on his left shoulder. That was Gu Zijia's doing. A few years ago, when Di Fui took her to the clan of the mermaid family, they attended an embroidery workshop. The embroiderers, they were very skillful. That day, Gu Shijio suddenly had the interest to learn the trade, so she studied under Ality there for 2 days. Then, she took Di Fui's clothes to practice her newly acquired skill. Initially, she wanted to knit a small flower, but later, she was inspired to put a big star on his shoulder. She did not expect Di Fui to like the pair of robes so much. He wore it often when he wandered around the city. If anyone asked him about the star on his shoulder, he would always reply with great satisfaction, "It was sewed on by my wife." How does it look? Those people naturally complimented it and remarked on the craftiness of his wife. Di Fui would be very satisfied by their response, and it quickly became his favorite set of robes. Gu Shijiu certainly did not expect to see him on the screen with this set of robes on. When he first appeared, he looked a little embarrassed and sweaty, as if he had desperately rushed to this place. Sponsored content remove ads? Was he real? Did he actually come for her? He looked exhausted. It seemed like Flying Serpent must have informed him when it noticed something was not right. Gu Shijiu had not seen him for almost a month. Seeing him warmed her heart, and she subconsciously wanted to approach him. But just when she took a step forward, the demon waved her sleeve, and a black golden light flashed. From then on, Gu Shijiu could not move. The demon put one hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't worry, you can watch the show." Gu Shijiu bit her lip as she was curious to see what would happen. She glanced at the demon and then looked back at the woman dressed in green in the scene. "Who is that?" "An avatar that I have created." The woman in white smiled. Her tone was smug. Gu Shijiu looked at the green-dressed woman in the scene and the way she interacted with Di Fui. She was very expressive and seemed to emulate Gu Zijia's movements perfectly. It would definitely be difficult to differentiate her from the real person. As she watched on, she realized that the woman actually knew some of the things between them. For example, she knew how long Gu Shijiu and Di Fui had been apart, which was something that Gu Shijiu had not revealed to anyone. Gu Shijiu stared at the woman in white and asked, "How did she know about the things between Fui and me? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsors game to support us." Chapter 30:11. You have talked too much. 3. The woman in white chuckled as she replied, "It's very simple. I read some of your memories earlier, so I know everything between you and him." The woman's hand, that was still sitting on Gu Zijia's shoulder, suddenly felt significantly heavier. "Shijiu, don't forget, I used to be a part of you. It is easy for me to sense your memory." Gu Shijiu did not answer her and continued to watch as the scenes unfolded. She saw Di Fui and the woman in green walk into an elegantly furnished small courtyard. She heard Di Fui praise the layout and design of this little courtyard, and she inadvertently bit her lip. The inner demon looked at Gu Shijiu proudly. "So what if you are in your original body? You have many flaws. For example, you are not an expert in interior design. Also, you have a terrible sense of beauty and fashion. And most importantly, I am so much stronger than you." Gu Shijiu heaved a sigh as she asked, "Since you are my inner demon, you should also carry the same flaws as me. How can you be good at what I am bad at?" The demon responded leisurely, "I have swallowed the souls of many craftsmen, so it is easy for me to extract any knowledge from them. I'm not only a master of design, but also a master of cooking. Additionally, my embroidery skills are also amazing. The flowers I sew are so realistic to the point where you can almost smell the aroma. Did you see the wedding gown earlier? I embroidered it." Then, she glanced at the star on Di Fui's shoulder and looked disgusted. "Is it your design? It is hideous. After your reincarnation, you seem to be worse than before. Someone like you doesn't even deserve to carry his shoes. How did you even get him to marry you?" The woman in white obviously hated Gu Shijiu to the core. She insulted her at every opportunity to constantly remind Gu Shijiu how useless she was in the present. Nevertheless, Gu Shijiu remained silent all the while as she continued to watch the screen. In fact, she did not seem to be listening to the woman in white. Meanwhile, the woman in white kept her eyes on her and suddenly sneered. "You have changed." Gu Shijiu just nodded but still did not say anything. Her calmness made the woman extremely frustrated. "You have lost your passion. You seem just like a piece of wood." The god of creation of the past, Gu Shijiu, would not have been so calm if she encountered such an incident. It was then that Gu Shijiu replied, faintly, "Don't treat me like her. Even though I used to be her, it was only in the past." The woman in white snorted. "You are right. You are not as good as her. Too bad. Your annoying looks have not changed." Gu Shijiu answered, "Thank you for the compliment." The woman in white was raging. She did not intend to praise her. When she was about to say something, Gu Shijio put the finger on her lips. Hey, shut up. Since you are so knowledgeable, you should know that you should remain silent when you watch a movie. Since you wanted to watch the show, let me watch it comfortably. You have talked too much. The woman in white was speechless. Her face gradually became blue. Fortunately, it seemed things were about to get hot on the screen. The woman in green wanted to change into her wedding dress in front of Difui. Although Gu Shijio had been very calm until now, she felt a little anxious about what was going to happen next. Would Difui really watch her change? Although the woman in green looked the same as her, she was not Gu Shijio. Therefore, she did not want him to look at another woman's body. She would certainly be jealous. The woman in white finally saw that Gu Shijio had become a little anxious. She sneered again. Now, you're anxious, right? Later on, they will have sex. Then you can see how your husband pleases another woman. Chapter 30:12. No more intimate show. Gu Shijio bit her lip, but did not utter a word. She had already made up her mind that if Difui really watched the woman in green get changed, she would try to wash his eyes once they were reunited. For example, she would tempt him with her own body or give him a pole dance to stimulate him, but then force him to keep a distance. He can watch the show but will not be able to touch her body. It was going to be a form of punishment for him. Humph! How does it feel when you watch your husband pampering another woman? The woman in white refused to let it go and continued to taunt her. Gu Shijio did not answer her question, but asked, since you also like him very much, do you feel good when you see him with another woman? The white woman laughed, and her eyes seemed to widen oddly. I forgot to tell you, since she is my avatar, I will be able to feel anything that she feels. It can also be said that we share our feelings. If he is intimate with her, it is the same as being intimate with me. I will naturally feel good about what happens next. Gu Shijio remained silent. Was there such a thing? Inside the illusion, Difui watched the woman in green with interest as she removed her skirt and shirt. Seeing that she was about to take off her undershirt, Difui suddenly asked, Where is Hao Er? Have you seen him? The woman in green was stunned by the odd question and sighed. No, I was trapped here since I entered and have not been able to get out. In fact, I'm also worried about his safety, but unfortunately, she sighed softly and seemed to be in tears. Fui, let's not think about those unhappy things at this moment. I haven't put on this wedding dress for you to see. Difui gazed at her and said, Shijio, is it more important to look for Hao Er or to have another wedding here? The green-dressed woman remained silent. She hesitantly replied, Of course it is important to find Hao Er, but we can go out now. It's useless. Difui interrupted her. What if I have a way out? The woman in green was stunned and wondered. Do you? How is it possible? How is it impossible? Don't forget, I am a master at breaking wizardry barriers. As long as I want to go out, no place can trap me. The woman paused for a moment and looked around. Well, it's very comfortable here. I actually love this place so much. I was even thinking of staying here with you one day and just stay free from the worldly problems outside. Shijio, no matter how good it is an illusion after all. We have to look for Hao Er. Hao Er is likely suffering now and waiting for us to save him. You have to think about him. The woman in green could not argue with him. She strongly suppressed the desires in her heart, but was still reluctant. What method do you have to go out? Difui walked around the house and seemed to be looking through the things in the room, seemingly looking for the key to break the barrier. Meanwhile, the woman followed beside him. In the desert, the woman in white looked at the screen and pursed her lips. Gu Shijio flicked her finger as she replied, No more intimate show then. The woman in white sneered. Don't be so proud. Difui can't break the wizardry barrier. I will wait for him to study it for a moment. When he realizes that he can't break it, I will bring up the wedding to him again. At that time, he will have no reason to turn me down. She glanced at Gu Shijio again. It seems that he is not as interested in you as you thought. Chapter 30:13. Was her son an illusion? Gu Shijio looked down at the ground as she replied softly, We are already an old couple that is familiar with each other. Naturally, the demand for this type of activity is weak. What's more, he is practicing his immortality. There is not much desire in his body now. The woman in white's pretty face seemed to suggest that she was a little suspicious of what Gushijio had said. She moved closer to Gushijio as she wanted to reread her mind. However, Gushijio was a great deity. Whether it was her body or soul, there was a natural barrier that could end up injuring the woman in white, so she did not go too deep into Guzigius' memories before and was reluctant to try again. Hence, she was not sure if what Gushijio said was true. She ended up just staring into Guzigius' eyes and sighed. That's because you're too weak. After some time with him, he has seen your shortcomings. He knows that you are not worthy of his love, so he has lost his interest in you. Fortunately, I am different from you. I'm stronger than you, and I know more than you and have a better personality than you. Once I am together with him, I will never let him get bored again. He will be happy every single day and love me very much. Gushijio sighed. This demon seemed to have eaten a lot of mistresses. She sounded like a typical mistress right now. This demon looked like Gushijio, but was her mind just a collection of mistresses? The woman in white's eyes then returned to the screen. From time to time, she commented on one or two things with a tone that was full of superiority. It seemed that Difui could not find the entrance to the illusion, so it was only a matter of time before the two became intimate with one another again. Meanwhile, Gushijio was no longer focused on the mirage. Instead, she looked at Di Hao, who was next to her. Di Hao was standing quietly beside her. He did not seem to want to be noticed, but when he saw Gushijio looking at him, he called her Mother. There was a little hoarseness in his voice, but it still sounded like him. Gushijio frowned, as Di Hao's behavior seemed rather odd for this situation. It seemed like he was controlled by this demon and unable to move freely. She looked at Fan Xianxue again, and Fan Xianxue looked at her for a moment before he looked up at the sky arrogantly. She did not know what he was thinking, but he was quiet from the beginning until now. Had he been restrained too? Gushijio glanced at her son again, and her heart suddenly moved. Was her son an illusion? Knowing Di Hao, even if he were unable to go forward and fight with the woman, he would be actively voicing out his dissatisfaction and the woman in white's actions. However, he was so well-behaved to the point where it almost felt as though he did not exist. This was not like Di Hao at all. However, Gushijio wanted to ask Di Hao a few things to verify his identity, but then the woman in white blocked her view by standing between Gushijio and Di Hao. Gushijio looked at her and asked, "What's the matter with you?" The woman in white squinted her eyes. "Are you really not concerned that he will get intimate with me?" Gushijio was speechless. To be honest, she was not very concerned. The woman in white suddenly laughed. "You think he will be able to break the wizardry barrier, right? I might as well tell you, the key to the barrier is on my body. He can't find it." But just as she said those words, her body suddenly trembled. She felt something and quickly looked back into the mirage. Inside the elegant house in the mirage, Difui had gone around the place twice now with the woman in green tailing him. However, the man stopped all of a sudden and the woman crashed into his back. Chapter 3014. It turns out that he likes this style. Difui turned around and caught her in time, so the woman in green ended up falling into his arms. In their intimate encounter, she blew hot breath into his ear as she said, "As I told you, we can't break it." "No, we can. But, Shijio, you have to bear with me for a while." Difui sighed. What? What do I have to bear with?" The green-dressed woman opened her eyes widely while still in his arms. "Close your eyes." Difui sounded like he was trying to seduce her. The woman in green's eyes flashed with curiosity, but she closed her eyes in anticipation. She could feel Difui's palm pressed gently on her lower abdomen. The heat made the woman's cheeks blush. At the same time, the woman in white in the desert also blushed. Apparently, she was feeling the same sensation as her avatar. Quickly, she proudly glanced at Gushijio and remarked, "It turns out that he likes this style." However, before she could finish her sentence, her body suddenly trembled, and her facial expression suddenly changed. She was even paler than before. The scene in the mirage had also seen a quick turn of events. While Di Fui had his palm on her abdomen, it had suddenly turned into a sharp knife. The knife went down straight into the belly of the woman. He knew the exact location of the acupuncture point that he wanted to attack, and did it in such an unexpected way. Therefore, the woman in green did not have time to block the attack. The green-dressed woman screamed and turned pale very quickly. She struggled for a moment in his arms and said, "You, Fui, what are you doing?" She wanted to push him away, but was still unsure of what was going on. On the other hand, Di Fui did not hold back. He twisted the sharp knife around in her belly. The woman screamed, and her body eventually turned into yellow sand. Right when the woman in green disappeared, the peach-filled scene began to collapse at once. Back in the desert, the woman in white looked as though she had been stabbed with a knife. She suddenly bent down and looked utterly shocked. How could it be? She had placed the exit key of the wizardry barrier in such a strange place, and yet Di Fui was able to see it. What did she go wrong? The woman in white clenched her fists tightly in agony and frustration. Her skills were extremely high, so even though the Avatar's ability was not as powerful as hers, it should be equivalent to Di Fui's current power. If Di Fui had not attacked out of the blue, there was no way that he could succeed. She looked at the collapsed peach blossom scene in the mirage, and her pretty face turned greenish. On the contrary, Gushijio looked very pleased with the outcome. She knew that the woman in white shared the same feeling as her avatar. So since the woman in green disappeared, at the very least, this woman should be severely injured. Nevertheless, just when Gushijio was distracted by the positive outcome, the woman in white suddenly leaped into the air, and her palm turned into a sword that pierced into Di Hao's chest. Although Gushijio was initially really suspicious about whether Di Hao was an illusion, watching this scene and cleared up any doubts. She was shocked, and her facial expression revealed it. Stop! Blood sprayed out from Di Hao's chest at once, and he seemed to be in pain. His small body trembled while his eyes kept looking at Gushijio. His little mouth opened slightly as he struggled to scream, "Mother, save!" Gushijio felt as though someone had knocked her head really hard. "Bitch!" She did not even finish her sentence before the woman in white suddenly rushed forward in her direction. Gushijio only felt a gust of wind blow on her face, and her body trembled for a moment. Then, everything around her turned black. When she opened her eyes again, she found that she was floating in the air. That was not a good sign, as it meant that her soul was out of her body now. She subconsciously looked down and found that her body was not lying on the ground. Instead, it seemed to be hovering above the ground and looking up at her. Gushijio quickly looked around, also realized that the woman in white was missing. Chapter 30:15. The game in the game. Gushijio suddenly understood what had happened. Her body had been stolen. The demon hid her soul away when she was in turmoil over Di Hao and then took the opportunity to seize her body. Nevertheless, since Gushijio was a great deity, she could condense her soul into another solid body. When she was about to pinch a spell, the demon flicked her finger and a big hole suddenly appearing beside Gushijio. This big hole had a strong suction force and sucked Gushijio's soul into it. Everything was a blur to Gushijio for a moment, but when things cleared up, she found herself in a transparent cell. The reason why she called it a transparent cell was that she could see everything in the desert from this cell. She seemed to have been separated from the desert by just a transparent film. She even found that she could also hear the demon speaking. The demon was feeling smug. It seems he could actually tell that it was my avatar. But now that I have occupied your shell, I doubt he would be able to distinguish us. Even if he did, he would not use a knife on me. Shijio, I did not like your useless body. However, I will occupy it for Fui. I will use your body and live happily ever after with him. Gushijio cursed at her. You are such a pervert. Her inner demon smirked. Am I? I have more unusual things to show you. This water prison was designed by me, especially for you. You will experience a mixture of water and fire in it. You have trapped me in this desert for 100,000 years, so I want to trap you in this water prison for millions of years." While she talked, there was some black water present in the cell. This black water emerged from the bottom of her feet and quickly passed her leg to her waist. This black water was obviously different from any kind of water that Gushijio had seen. What she quickly realized was that nothing could float in it. She could only watch the black water float past her chest or neck, and then reach her chin. It did not take long before her entire body was submerged in it. By right, if Gushijio was in her soul form, she did not need to breathe and should not be afraid of the water. However, after she was submerged in it, it felt like she was sitting in a pot of boiling water. It did not feel like a normal burning fire, but she could definitely feel as though she was being burnt. Gushijio also realized that she had a need to breathe, but she could not. It did not take long before her vision started to turn black. But just when she felt like she was going to faint, the black water retreated, and her head was just above the water. The water was really black, so there was nothing that she could see when the water had reached the top of her head. With the water level falling, she could finally see what was happening, and her heart sank at once. She noticed that she was now watching a scene in the Gobi Desert. The Gobi Desert was full of large and small black stones that distinguished it from any other desert. At the moment, 3 people were standing in the Gobi Desert: Di Fui, Di Hao, and Gushijio. When the illusion of Peach Blossom Garden collapsed, Di Fui fell from the inside and landed in the Gobi Desert. The moment he landed in the desert, he seemed to sense something and quickly turned to see what appeared to be a mother and her son not too far away. Gushijio seemed to be seriously injured. Her face was pale, and there was blood on her lips. Nevertheless, she refused to treat her own wounds and was busy treating Di Hao instead. Di Hao's chest was stained red with blood. Apparently, he was seriously injured too. His eyes were closed, and he seemed to be in a drowsy state. Gushijio seemed to hear some movements in the desert and drew a sword out in her hand. Oh! When her eyes saw the person in the distance, she paused and stood still. She looked at the man in disbelief. Fui? Her voice trembled slightly. Chapter 30:16. A raccoon for a prince. She seemed to want to rush over to him, but she did not dare to do so this time. Besides, she was still holding her sword tightly in her hand. "You has that bitch disguised you? Don't you try to hurt my son." Gushijio looked rather disheveled at that time. Her hair was all over the place, while her clothes were untidy. There was even a little dirt on her pretty face. It was only her eyes that were still shining like stars. It seemed that the woman was a true Gushijio and no longer an impersonation. Di Fui sighed with relief and opened his arms to her. He seemed to carry an unsuspecting posture that suggested that he was the real Di Fui. "Baby, who do you think can impersonate me?" Gushijio seemed to recognize him to be the real Di Fui. She started to tear at once and ran directly into his arms. "You are finally here." Di Fui was stunned for a moment as he looked down at her while she was in his arms and raised his hand to put her messy to the back of her ears. After that, his eyes swept across the back of her left ear, where there was a tiny scar that could not be seen a careful look. This feature was very hidden to the point where even Gushijio herself did not know about it. However, Di Fui had many intimate relations with her, so every part of her body was deeply imprinted in his mind. He could even remember all the small details. As the little scar was there, it proved that she was indeed the real Gushijio. At the very least, this body was hers. But if it were her, the posture that she used to cuddle him did not feel quite the same. Gushijio always liked to hold his waist when she was in his arms. She always said that his thin and strong waist was pleasant to touch and gave her a sense of security. But now, when she rushed into his arms, her arms were wrapped around his back. It was a very subtle difference, and nothing else seemed wrong at the moment. Gushijio quickly gathered her emotions and walked to Di Hao while holding hands with Di Fui. "Let's check on Hao Air. He is seriously injured," Di Hao had fainted, and the wound on his chest was treated halfway by Gu Shijio. When Di Fui looked at the wound, he knew that the injury would be fatal if it were not treated timely. He analyzed his son's wound and had applied an elixir on the injury, but there was no stitching, so blood kept oozing out from time to time. Shijio, I think it would be better to sew the wound, Di Fui suggested. Gu Shijio paused for a moment and said, Well, Fui, why don't you do it for him? Di Fui stared at her and replied, Shijio, I am not as good as you at stitching. Gu Shijio bit her lips as she replied, I know, but I have also been hurt. I am very, very uncomfortable now. I am afraid that I will not be able to concentrate on it. Otherwise, I would have already stitched it up nicely for him. Di Fui immediately took her hand and asked, Are you hurt? Where's the injury? Come, let me have a look. He wanted to check her pulse for her. Gu Shijio quickly pulled off her hand away and said, My injuries are not urgent. I can treat myself. You should treat Hao Air first. I am afraid that he will not be able to delay his treatment any longer. Our kid is more important. Di Fui glanced at her again and was still worried. It's okay. Let me check on you first. It won't take too much time. He raised his hand and pulled her into his arms. Gu Shijio's body stiffened, and there was a slight change in her facial expression. This position was very similar to the posture Di Fui had in the illusion just before he stabbed her with a knife. Intuitively, she quickly pushed him away and stayed out of his arms. Subconsciously, she took 2 steps back, and as soon as she looked up, she saw Di Fui staring at her. Awkwardly, she said, Our son is in danger. Why aren't you tending to him first instead of pulling me close to you? Go and help him. Chapter 30:17. A raccoon for a prince, too. All right, then you should treat your injuries first. I will focus on our son. Di Fui then went to check on their son. Gu Shijio watched Di Fui from the side as he treated Di Hao's injuries. It seemed to be working, so she sighed with relief. Then, she turned to look at a large gray stone at the side that was not far away. Her lips seemed to curve upward all of a sudden. In the water prison, the water level had gone down slightly to that Gu Zijia's head was revealed just enough that she could see the entire scene. She was watching the demon at that very moment. The demon was obviously able to see her, and the smile on her lips was meant to ridicule her and express her triumph. Gu Shijio clenched her fists under the water. Her body was hot and uncomfortable, and she could still hear the voice of the demon. Is this water prison comfortable? This will be your permanent residence, and I will replace you in your own life and be loving to Fui. I will travel all over the mountains and rivers with him, and will take good care of your 2 children for Fui. You can stay here in peace and quietly wait for the last day of your life. Gu Shijio thought to herself that the woman must be dreaming. Di Fui would surely notice it. Gu Shijio snorted in her heart as she turned her attention to Di Fui, hoping that he could see her. Since the demon could look at her and send a directed audio into the water prison, maybe Di Fui could also do so. Perhaps he might find the place unusual and choose to explore it. Nevertheless, before she could wait until Di Fui looked in her direction, she was once again drowned by the black water. This time, the temperature of the weak water seemed to have risen by 3 or 4 degrees. The pain was unbearable, so she forcibly tried to set up a wizardry barrier to isolate the black water from herself. However, it was tough to set up such a wizardry barrier as a soul. She could only support it for 5 to 6 minutes before she felt that she was going to faint. Fortunately, the black water finally retreated just then, so she could take a deep breath. Unfortunately, the air she breathed in seemed to carry some heat with it too that made her throat burn. Although she was usually calm, at the moment, her heart was burning like a flame. She could not help but look outwards again, and her heartbeat almost skipped a beat. Di Fui was standing very close to the prison. In fact, his palms were just above the prison, so she could see it up above. Fui, the black water became hotter as she got closer to the front to try to communicate with him. Nevertheless, Gu Shijio did not care about the heat and rushed over. Fui, she shouted with a hoarse voice as she rushed forward. She pushed through the water with a large force that made swirls in the black water. She shouted as loud as she could to the point where her ears almost burst. However, there was no response. Defui did not respond at all. His sight was clearly fixed on the water prison, but he could not see her at all. He looked at the water prison like a stone. There was no expression at all on his handsome face. Gu Shijio endured the pain of the boiling water and put her palm on the transparent film to try to touch his hand. Fui, Fui. She called him as her eyes turned red. The wall was hot and felt like boiling magma. It even sizzled a little when her hand touched it to the point where she could smell something burning. It was strange that, even as a soul, she could be burnt and even smell it. She bit her lips tightly and pressed her hand on the wall again as she called out to him over and over again. She only hoped that he was able to hear him telepathically. Don't call him anymore. Once again, the demon voice was heard through the top of the water prison. She continued to gloat. He will not see you even if you shout at him until you lose your voice. What he sees is only a stone. Published at 28th of May, 2020, 2:45 and 6 seconds p.m. Chapter 3018. 3018. Was she sealed away in a big boulder? Sponsored content remove ads? From D. Fui's perspective, what he could see was indeed just an ordinary boulder. After stitching up Di Hao's wound, he placed him on a large rock to rest. Then, he decided to take a stroll around the place, and coincidentally stood in front of the boulder where Gu Shijio was trapped. This rock was no different from the other rocks in the area. It was about half the height of an average person and felt cold and hard when he touched it. Gu Shijio knew that he could not see anything abnormal with it, so she acted smug to Gu Shijio. Nevertheless, her facial expression showed that she was concerned. Fui, how is Hao Air? The impostor asked in a kind and gentle way, making her sound like a loving mother. He is okay. Fortunately, I managed to treat him in time. Nevertheless, he needs to rest for about an hour before he can move again. Defui came to her and said, "Come here. Let me check on your injuries. Can you show them to me?" Sponsored content remove ads? Gu's Zigious eyes flashed a little before she stretched out her hand and let him examine her pulse. Due to her immense skill, her rate of recovery was excellent. Although Defui had recently stabbed her avatar and caused her great distress, the pain had already subsided by now. However, to play along with her earlier lie, she secretly exercised her spiritual power to hurt a vein of her body. Therefore, when Defui checked her pulse, her eyes purposely focused on the stone that Gu Shijio was sealed in to see her ashen face. The demon was very satisfied with the result and made it clear to Gu Shijio. In order to prevent any suspicion, she quickly returned her attention to Defui and leaned against him as she complained, "Fui, I am so tired." Defui wrapped one arm around her and said, "Lean on me." Sponsored content remove ads? Gu Shijio would not turn down the opportunity. As she laid on him, she could briefly smell his boda's scent. She closed her eyes and subconsciously muttered, "It has been so many years, yet the fragrance on your body has not changed." Defui looked at her and said, Gu Shijio mumbled, "Fui, I really miss the smell of your body. Finally, I can smell it today." She buried her face in his arms as she continued, "I will never leave you again." Defui remained silent. His eyes flashed slightly as he took her other hand to check her pulse. He casually said, "The vein leading to your heart is injured." "Who hurt you and Hao Air?" "It was Fan Qianshi. He caught Hao Air and tortured him. Fortunately, I came in time." Sponsored content remove ads? "It is really him. Where is he now?" Defui swiftly surveyed the place, but did not see Fan Qianshi. When he heard Hao Air, I was furious and wanted to kill him. In a desperate attempt to kill him, I seem to have subconsciously learned a new skill. However, I think the attack took a toll on my body, so as a result my heart got injured. Fortunately, I managed to injure him seriously. The lies seemed airtight. Defui heaved a sigh of relief and held her hand. It's fortunate that you and Hao Air are all right. As for the bastard, Fan Qianshi, I will end him sooner or later. Yeah. Gu Zijia's inner demon was satisfied by the response she received. She could not help but take another glimpse of the big boulder again, where Gu Shijio was sealed. Di Fui looked at their surroundings and asked, "What happened to this desert? Do you know?" "It is probably the array formation set by Fan Qianshi. As you know, he is the god of creation. Therefore, it is possible for him to turn the desert into a lethal array." All the blame was conveniently placed on Fan Qianshi. It became clear to Gu Shijio that Di Fui was happy with her explanations. He did not seem to doubt her at all. The two of them chatted for a while, and Di Fui was certainly curious about the skills that she had acquired on her own. Gu Shijio did not mind showing him, as she wanted him to know that she was now stronger. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.